All right, welcome everyone. We're called to order here at 5 o'clock. We're going to start out with item B, a moment of silence. If y'all would join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. We're going to jump around on a couple things. There's some folks I want to get taken care of on the front end before we address resolutions. So we're going to start with item J1. And I'd ask on J1 to have a motion to continue this out to a date of the applicant's preference, and presence for that matter.
So moved.
Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and second that. All in favor of continuing out item J1 to a date of the applicant's preference, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Yeah, we'll get her in a second.
That day is November 10th.
November 10th.
Thank you.
Perfect. Continue to November 10th then. All right, next one we'll address is item J2, and I would ask for a motion to continue that one out to 11:10 as well.
So moved, sir.
All right, I'll go ahead and second your motion, Commissioner Pritchett, to continue out item J's and Juliet 2 to 11:10. All in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. And then the last two that I'm going to ask to have the same motion for, to continue out item H2. Ms. Bentley, do we need to read that into the record if it's just being continued?
That's the public hearing vacating, yes.
Yes.
And
Okay.
determine if there is anyone in the audience to speak.
Okay, perfect. Anyone here to speak on H2? Come on up. If you would, and if you just state your name for the record as well.
Hi, my name is Jared Moore. I live at 200 Cadiz. I'm here today to hope for a vacating of the easement for a deck that was built on a property that I acquired that was built before I moved into that property. I mean, I didn't know that anything was wrong with the deck until 2 days before closing. And then I found out there was an issue with the deck. And so I've gone through everything that I can do to do everything properly to see if I can keep the deck, because we actually like the deck. Hopefully we can vacate the easement so we can keep the deck. It was, like I said, it was done by the former homeowner. I didn't know there was anything wrong with it. And when we bought it, we found out the 11th hour that it didn't have a permit. So we're trying to do things the right way and get it taken care of.
And sir, I know we spoke about this before the meeting, and just for the sake of brevity, do you have an opposition to continuing this out to 11:10? At which point I'll do my best to get you fast-tracked on the front end, and in all likelihood, this will be approved in short order.
Sure, that's fine, sir.
I appreciate that. So Commissioner Pritchett, could I trouble you for another motion to continue this one to 11:10?
Motion to table to 11:10.
All right, I'll
thank
go
you.
ahead and second that motion. All in favor of tabling item H's in Hotel 2 to 11:10, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously. See you soon, and hopefully it should be painless the next time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right, last but not least, item H is in Hotel 3. I would ask for the same motion on this. Do we have anyone here to speak on that item? Okay, do you all have any opposition to it being continued out to 11:10? Yeah, staff should have reached out to you. I don't know, do we have Tad somewhere around here? Maybe? Anyone from the department? Oh, there you go. You want to come up just for a quick second, or? Yeah, I don't know if you didn't hear back from them, or?
So my understanding is our staff reached out to both parties, H2 and H3.
Okay.
And my understanding on this particular one is that we don't know the pool size dimensions yet.
Okay.
And so obviously we encourage them to come tonight, but our intention would be to make sure that we understand that in respect to your request, and then minimize the dimensions that they're looking for.
Perfect. And yeah, and I apologize if that information didn't reach you before. Bottom line with this is with the prior item, I don't have any problem, at least from my perspective as the D2 commissioner, with either of the requests, but I just want to make sure that they're as narrowly tailored as possible to suit the needs. So if you just work with staff between now and November 10th to make sure that they have all the info they need to understand exactly what the size of the pool that you plan on installing will be. When this is added, again, just as I said with the prior individual that was up here, I'll try to fast track you so that hopefully it'll be a painless experience the next time you're here. Is that all right? Okay, I'll take, I guess, as at least not opposition to it, but like I said, I think it'll be pleasant the next time around. So could I have a motion to continue at this item H3 to 1110?
So moved.
All right, I'll go ahead and second Commissioner Pritchett's motion to continue this out to 1110. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. I just didn't want you all to sit for the remainder of the meeting to find out it was just being tabled. All right, let's see here. Okay, we'll go back and circle back to items under E as in Echo, resolutions, awards, and presentations. We have item E1, Commissioner Tobias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And the person that, the family of the person that passed away couldn't be here, so I sent an email out asking that we table this till a later date.
Okay, so I'll take that as a motion to table. Is that all right?
I think it's
Yes,
already been
Mr. Chair.
deleted.
Okay, perfect. I'll go ahead and second the motion to table if it's not already been deleted, as I hear may be the case. All in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. That item's tabled. All right, item E2, Commissioner Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my privilege to sponsor this resolution again this year, and I'll read it. Whereas among American women, breast cancer is the second most common cancer and the second leading cause of cancer death. And whereas the American Cancer Society's 2020 estimates for breast cancer in women include 276,480 new diagnosed cases, and about 42,000 of those women will die from breast cancer. And whereas breast cancer occurs mainly in women, men can also get it. The American Cancer Society's 2020 estimates for breast cancer in men include 2,600 new cases, and about 520 of those men will die from breast cancer. Whereas during Breast Cancer Awareness Month, we remember those lost to breast cancer, offer our support to patients and their families, and highlight our commitment to better prevention, detection, and treatment methods. And whereas the District 4 Commission Office has indicated a desire to help support the treatment and awareness of breast cancer by promoting Real Men Wear Pink. And whereas the mission of Real Men Wear Pink gives men a leadership role in the fight against breast cancer. Community leaders around the nation use the power of pink to raise awareness and money for the American Cancer Society's breast cancer initiatives, including innovative research, patient services, and education around screenings and risk reduction. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida does hereby proclaim the month of October 2020 as Breast Cancer Awareness Month and supports research, awareness, and treatment of breast cancer. Done, ordered, and adopted in regular session the 6th day of October 2020. Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we adopt this resolution.
I'll go ahead and second that motion, Commissioner Smith. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
I would also like to mention that as the chairman of Real Men Wear Pink, I am raising funds, as I do each year, along with the other members of my team. And this year I've set my goal at $7,500, at which point, drum roll please, I've agreed.
Is that a motion for a drum roll, Commissioner?
I've agreed to dye my hair pink. And I've also decided just today that if I just get $500 more, up to $8,000, I'll dye my beard as well. So there you go. There's the incentive. Thank you,
Pretty
Mr.
good.
Chair.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so we're through item E. We'll move on to item F. Looks like we do have one public comment card on item F5. Would any of the commissioners like any of the other consent items pulled? Okay, seeing as there are no other requests, could I have a motion to approve consent less F5?
So moved.
All right, I'll go ahead and second your motion, Commissioner Smith. All in favor of approving consent less F5, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, consent less F5 is passed unanimously. We'll go ahead and address F5. We have one card from Peter Carnesale, Vieira. Mr. Carnesale?
Basically, I have kind of a question, and it will probably go to Commissioner Smith since it's his district. And that's, basically, it's my understanding that the sewer line distances were developed as part of the ecosystem in terms of trying to get the sewage under control. And I would want to know why new projects, whatever they are, basically don't work around those rules.
Yeah, Commissioner, if you don't care to address it, certainly I'm not going to obligate anyone to address anything, but if you'd like, I certainly will give you time.
Well, it's standard operating procedure that we prefer sewer whenever we approve developments. And we are doing that more so all the time. That's a simple answer.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so with that said, I don't have any more cards on that item. May I have a motion one way or the other, sir?
So moved.
All right, a motion to approve from Commissioner Smith. I'll go ahead and second his motion to approve. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, approved unanimously. Okay, so we'll move on to public comments. There are 3 public comment cards, assuming my math is right, and I think with the number that low, it probably is. First up, we'll have Mr. Tovey from Melbourne. Then we'll have Dina Ryder-Hicks from West Melbourne, and then David, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing your last name, Surden from Fruitland.
David Surdar, Fruitland
Surden.
Park, Florida, 34731.
Perfect. There we go. Sir, we've got 2 gentlemen up before you, and then I promise you I'd be happy to hear from you. All right. Mr. Tovey. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Charles Tovey, 2555 Roberts Road, Melbourne. Items on Lagoon, usually. Can't hit home runs all the time when I do public speaking, but I do appreciate the recognition of public speaking. And if they could look into fixing the uneven drainage vents on the Pineda overpass that's new, constructed over the train tracks, that'd be nice. It's a hazard sometimes. About the algae bloom, I mentioned earlier a couple meetings ago, the months that the algae blooms most likely will occur. It's mid-July through August, October, December, mid-February, and May. And what's happening now is like 6 weeks prior. What's happening now is 6 weeks after what was started. And it starts with the dry weather, then everybody goes to watering after they fertilize their yards. And it's still dry weather, and then the rains come, and then all the water table that's built up in the subdivisions and all along the industries, that gets flushed, and it takes 3 weeks for it to get to the lagoon and work itself, and it takes about 3 weeks for it to manifest itself on land. So it's about 6 weeks, and I'm glad I worked on the lagoon because it might not be as bad as it could have been or still could be. I'd be further along had I not found a nice cooler with some bones in it, and it was strange bones I wasn't recognizing, and I don't have a phone, and all my stuff was looted, so I'm going to try and work on that this coming week, and I appreciate Scott Ellis for being an American and all his work for the county. That's about it. Oh, the people who are doing these offenses towards me, I don't know if I know them or not, and most likely I don't, because anyways, I couldn't figure out the words, didn't want to waste my time with the 3 minutes, but it's conniving, animalistic people with a vengeance towards me, and I don't even know these people, and I'm still having issues with other things, and the reason why I come up here is because to get an appointment with anybody or to find any kind of cooperation with anybody is very difficult, so I have to force my way up here and say things, and I come up here for my health and other things, which I'll reiterate on a later time. Thank you for your time this evening, and safe journey.
Thank you, Mr. Tovey. Good seeing you as always, sir. All right, Ms. Ryder-Hicks. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and distinguished members of the Commission. Dina Ryder-Hicks, 8328 Crimson Drive in Viera, also Public Affairs Manager for Waste Management in West Melbourne. Simply a brief service update this evening. We're now at day 6 of our new Brevard County Solid Waste Franchise Agreement. As far as personnel, some of our veteran drivers from another area of the county are now part of the Brevard County team. We have some brand new drivers as well that are now part of the Brevard team, also now out on the route. With the new assets now in place in Brevard, yesterday we began our newly added routes as we had discussed last November. And with adding these routes at this time, no residential service days are changing. However, residents may see our trucks arriving at different times on their service day than they may have seen for the past 7 years. I'm an example of this. For quite some time, my garbage truck used to come in the afternoon. This morning, it arrived at 8:15 a.m. So what we're suggesting with this is that in many cases, the trucks will arrive earlier in the day on their service day than what residents may have typically seen, or in some cases, vice versa. So what this means is that we're reminding residents to please make sure that all refuse is curbside prior to 6 a.m. on their service day, and make sure that it remains curbside until 8 p.m. on their service day, as the trucks now may be arriving at different times since we've added more routes. And once again, I'd just like to thank you for all of your support and for the trust and confidence you place in Waste Management. So thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. And before you leave, does anyone have an objection if we have Dawn work with her to get that information out, just so folks have at least a better chance of hearing it?
Thank you. Yes, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, if no one
Thank you.
objects, Dawn, if you don't mind, I'd just ask you to do what you can within reason to help her out with respect to disseminating that.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, my enthusiastic friend, you're up.
Wow. Talking about waste management, I know one of the guys that started that, Happy Henry, one of the 2 truck drivers, brothers out of World War II. I cleaned him. I'm a certified commercial cleaner. David Serdar, 66 Winter Green Drive, Fruitland Park, Florida, 34731. Senator Baxi, 12th District, calls me his buddy. I just left this morning the Indian River Commissioners meeting. I public speak. I got a map here. You can't believe how many counties I've spoken in. Public comment. I'm a concerned citizen that was a candidate this year for Lake County Water Authority, but I'm from Lake County, Illinois, and I've run for office. I'm worried about the election. I'm from the land of Lincoln. A house divided against itself cannot stand. And that's an Abraham Lincoln quote. And I was just quoted that in Palm Coast. I'm all over the state. I may be appointed by the governor to the St. John's River Water Management District. I wanted to introduce myself to your great leaders. You know, my chairman is Leslie Campion out of Lake County. I almost ran against Josh Blake when he came in out of Representative Marlene O'Toole's office. She works at Beacon College. I say my prayers. Congressman Mike Waltz, I got him signed up. I just ran into Congressman Polsey here. I've got Sheriff Ivy's card. He called me just a little while ago in Mr. Smith's office. My Uncle Paul was the Illinois Racehorse Chairman, 1954 to 62. He fought the mob, the mob got him back. I've got a book on Sam Giancana, on mafia. There was a mob. Our country's in trouble. I'm a Trump supporter, and by God, I work with Jerry Demings. Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings has given me his city pin. I go to school board, Sumter County, Lake County. I'm going across the street to your school board meeting right now. My dad was the principal of the same school he went to as a child, North Chicago, Illinois. And I was a North Chicago Warhawk fan in the black neighborhoods of North Chicago. I dated a Johnny May Christmas, all on humanity to me. And I've got a bottle bill in front of the governor. There's a lot of things going on. I know Senate President Bill Cavato. To an extent, he was there when I was up in Tallahassee sitting with Sheriff Billy Wood, January 28th. March 12th, aides of the governor came to talk to me. And Senate President Bill Cavato said his goodbyes. You know, I'm a concerned citizen that takes action. I'm sure many of you have gone to Tallahassee. There's a student day. There's a senior day. January 28th, 29th, Friday the 30th, Matt McLean, hardworking legislative aide to Senator Baxley, he had to go home. He had a new baby. That's what life's all about. His dad, Stan McLean, 23rd District State Rep. You know, our country is in trouble. This election is very important. I'm a very big Trump supporter. You know, President Trump doesn't wear glasses because he's got 20/20. I was at Cecil Airport in Jacksonville with Aircraft One. Air Force One there. Beautiful. Thousands of people. You know, I'm just a concerned citizen that knows that wars are fought with weapons. They're won by men and women. It's the spirit of the men and women that follow and people that lead, like you, that gain the victory.
Sir, I wish I had your energy. Thank you
Do
so
I have
much.
more time? I'll keep on going.
You got about 10 seconds.
Oh, 5. This is the Space Coast. 7. I came to see the SpaceX take off. Did it take off? 4, 3, 2, 1. Gone.
Thank you, sir. All right, that's it for public comment. That's a good way to end public comment on an upswing. Let's see. So we have item H's in Hotel 1. We can certainly have staff do an intro, but if someone wants to make a motion to pass, I would be very happy to second it. Oh, Commissioner Tobias, then Commissioner Pritchett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Kemper is either a genius for allowing us to use this property for study just before the legislature and DEP preempted us from taking action to prevent what is now occurring, or he made a giant mistake now that the veil has been dropped. The report from the county, supported by the University of Florida, DEP, St. John's Water Management District, and others, is pretty damning. I'm sure you guys read it, but let me hit on the highlights. It is clear the Deer Park site is supersaturated with phosphorus due to the application of biosolids, meaning that additional applicants led to phosphorus being dumped into the St. John River, where thousands of residents get their drinking water. Presence of copper in area where biosolids have been applied, where runoff application sites is also telling. PFAS-related chemicals were detected in the site where biosolids have been applied, or where runoff has come from those sites. Medications such as antibiotics and anti-inflammatory drugs were found in the vegetation on the property. While it might have seemed logical that these medications were associated with the cattle raised there, Mr. Kemfer denies that he uses such drugs to fatten cattle. Therefore, we are left with the explanation of the presence of these drugs being sourced from the biosolids. I certainly would like to thank Commissioner Lober for coming forward early in the process asking for this moratorium. Had I listened more at the time, we may not have been in this situation. As it turns out, my office drafted an ordinance for a full moratorium just when DEP came out with its guidance, which could be a basis for a legal challenge. In any case, I sent out a letter to all the commissioners yesterday for you guys to view. This letter requests that the Brevard delegation either pass legislation or, at a minimum, prevent the DEP guidance from taking effect. Should Brevard delegation heed our request, we could then put a stop to the application of the Class B biosolids in Brevard County completely. So while I will support, of course, this moratorium, I think we need to go a step further. And the properties that were grandfathered in, I think we need to ask the state permission to pull that grandfathering out. So we have the science here, and clearly we need to do something about it. And since we don't have that authority without state control, the letter is attached. I hope I can get your support, and we send this to the delegation chair.
Mr. Pritchett.
I was going to make a motion to approve your letter and to approve this item, sir. So I think Commissioner Tobias would like to, but I would like to second it when he's ready.
All right.
Mr. Chair, could we just combine them in the single motion?
I don't see why not. I'll take it that way.
Okay.
Are you all good with that? Mr.
So
Pritchett?
I'd like to change my motion to include that.
Okay, so in that case, we have a motion from Commissioner Smith and a second from Commissioner Pritchett? All right, I'm going to support this, but I just want to add, I certainly want to thank Billy Kemfer on it. I think the fact is, well, I think it's fairly obvious that neither we nor he knew what the results would be on the front end. And I think if there's anything that we can do as a county to recognize that fact in the future, if there's a request that comes before us that doesn't harm the environment, I certainly would be happy to try to do what we can to assist him, because he's been very, very good to work with on this issue. So, my supporting this is not at all intended to be a slight toward him. From everything I've seen, he's been a very honorable and continues to be a very honorable individual.
And I will second that as well. He truly is. He cares about the environment. His family long before him cared about the environment. And as Commissioner Tobias said, they didn't know. Nobody knew. But now, unfortunately, we have the situation that we have. And it's in a precarious place because most of those properties where this is used are they're in the proximity of the St. Johns River. So, and that water flows all the way to Jacksonville. So we're polluting the waters up through 2/3 of the state.
All right, I don't see any further discussion, so we'll go ahead and call the question on that. We've had the motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, passes unanimously. All right, we've continued out H2 to 1110, H3 to 1110 already. There is no unfinished business under Rise in India, so J's and Juliet, we continued J1 out to 1110, J2 out to 1110. All right, J3 it is. Oh, there you are. I was looking for you, Chief.
Would you like me to set it up, sir?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So J3 is a recommendation from the TDC to award $3.75 million to 3 capital facilities projects. The first one is Laurie Wilson Park. The second one is the Veterans Memorial Park in Merritt Island. And the third is the American Police Hall of Fame.
All right, just a question for Commissioner Pritchett, as I don't see any lights on at the moment. I know that there was a motion made at the TDC that passed unanimously shy one with how they allocated this. If you're okay with it, I'm okay with it. I just didn't want to have an issue where we were on a different page with respect to this, because I think they're all worthy projects. Commissioner Tobias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes,
and
sir.
I spent a little bit of time with this, so I would like to tackle this, first of all, in aggregate, and then individually with your permission, Mr. Chair.
Please.
Okay, on the aggregate, Mr. Hermanson, a member of the subcommittee that vetted these projects, has been quoted in the Florida Today stating that, quote, he likes the fact that these geographic areas of the county will benefit from the grant recommendations. So what I did is, over the last 10 years, looked at, assuming that that was a fair assessment, looking at how the districts had benefited from these capital expenditures. As you can see, it is extremely disproportionate. So that's number one, why I think that we should certainly vote this down. Let me go with number two. I'm going to have to vote against this because we set a guideline that there needs to be a minimum score from the board that oversees us at a 75. Not one of these 3 projects received a score of 75. In fact, one ended up at a 58.11 and another at 67. One was rather close, but it still did not receive that minimum score of 75. And finally, as an aggregate, believe that these are not the best uses of the TDT funds. The funds could be either spent on critical lagoon projects, which have an impact on tourism, including existing projects of the Sorrel Plan. If revenue drops, and it will, or we can reallocate these funds by ordinance to use the funds for core marketing, which already has seen significant reductions. So those are certainly some valid reasons why we should vote this down. But let me talk about these individually. Mr. Chair, I do have some questions for the applicants.
Please.
So do you want to hear from the applicants first? What is your...
We do have 2 cards. One
Sure.
is from Don Weaver with the Veterans Memorial Center, and we have another from Mr. Carnesale. So if you'd like, I can certainly have them come up and
Sure, why don't...
speak first.
Yeah,
And
that's
Mr.
it.
Chair, also Tara from the Police Hall of Fame is here to answer
Oh,
any
there you are.
questions, so.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to have you come up. If you want, let me know, and I'll certainly be happy to give you time as well. But let's start up with Mr. Weaver. One of the many Dons over there. Good to see you, sir.
Good to see you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the entire committee. The 40-year partnership between the veterans of Brevard County and the commission is a historically significant one. We have moved great strides in the last few years, especially. I want to thank you for that. We represent 70,000 veterans that live in Brevard County, but we also represent a community of Merritt Island where we are truly interested in helping the community to improve what's going on there. So in this partnership that we began with Tourist Development and the Merritt Island Redevelopment Agency, we worked hard over the last couple of years to come up with a design that would improve that park immensely and bring in a lot of tourism to the area through concerts and everything else. The particular amphitheater that we're planning has already been promised to be the home of the Brevard County Symphony Orchestra, among many other area people that will use it. It will certainly become the site of a lot of concerts that will bring in a lot of people from all over the state and the area to attend. Key Lime Pie festivals have been held there, average of 6,000 people, a state festival. So we hope that in fact the 3 items that were tourist development approved are sent forward to you for your approval are all disparate over the county. They're spread out over the county and north, central, and beach. And we really support all the other projects. And just to let you know, we hope that you'll have favorable consideration, and we promise, in concert with the government and the people of Merritt Island, our volunteers will use that facility upgrade to make it the best Veterans Memorial Park in the state by far, and probably in most states in the country. So we look for favorable consideration. I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I'm proud of what you guys do. Commissioner Tobias, do you have any questions for Mr. Weaver?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I went through your application, and according to your application, it looks like you averaged 16, according to your numbers, 16,500 visitors. That's pre-COVID. Is that correct?
That was in our museum only, sir. That's one small part of what we do. That didn't include everything.
Okay,
Those were the
so
ones where we
I'm
could-
just going by the numbers I saw. So what is it
Well,
what is it total?
We average about 60 to 70,000 people come to the Veterans Memorial Center and Park pre-COVID on all the different events and all the different activities. We host 10 different organizations. We outreach to the
Okay.
community with all kinds of rental activities. So it's well over those figures. That was just the museum numbers that we could point to.
I'm only
sir.
giving you the data. I'm only reading back the data that you
Okay,
provided
well-
us, right? So now these are your numbers again, not mine. You're estimating or projecting that there will be 284,000 visitors. Now, if I take the 16,500, that's like 17-fold. If I take an average of 60 and 70 at 65, that's like a 400% increase. My question is, what methodology did you use to come up with that either 400 or that 2,000% increase that you
The
claim?
projections were based on having the capital facilities capability with the amphitheater, and right now, they're working on $1.5 million extension of the Veterans Memorial Park.
No, I totally understand that if you get this money, but you had to use some methodology to
The
come up with those
methodology
numbers.
through tourist development recommendations and how we should do the methodology that we worked with them to come up with. This was over the course of several years. This was where it would grow. Because when you had the facility there, yeah, if I have anybody from Myra can help me out with more
I see
details
Larry's
there.
in the back there. At least it looks like Larry with a mask.
I'm just looking for the methodology, sir.
Well,
I'm sorry,
you know,
this is a lot
I'm
of
a
money,
veteran.
$1.27 million.
Yeah, if
I'm
you
a
want-
veteran and a career government employee. I didn't do methodology on this beyond working together with Myra. But, you know, we have a lot more. I'm sorry that we perhaps misaligned those figures of how many people would get to the museum. But there are many, many more people that come there to the park and to the area. So if we don't have anybody else from Myra, I guess I'll have to defer.
I see Larry
can't
Lalo
answer
in
the
the back.
question properly.
I do have a follow-up.
Sure.
And sir, I do greatly appreciate your service. However, I'm entrusted with tax dollars, and 1.27 million is a
So are
lot to
we
the people
at the
that I
s- so are we.
serve. Clearly not placing
Yes.
your sacrifice to mine, but I do take my job
Sir,
pretty
please
seriously.
don't equate any
So
sacrifice that I've done.
if we do
All I'm
cost
saying
benefits-
is that we as veterans will do our best with Myra.
I'm
to
not saying you
manage
won't,
this.
sir. I'm just asking how you came up with these exorbitant numbers. The cost-benefit analysis, which I'm sure you probably did, spending $1.3 million just of TDT dollars, providing an amphitheater that will compete, I imagine, directly against both public and private venues. These are concerts that would be held elsewhere. Can you tell me what that opportunity cost would be to the surrounding both public and private venues?
Competition is what we try to do. I mean, we're
Sir, I
giving-
love competition, but when government is involved, it's not competition. That is not competition, sir.
Well,
Two companies, taxpayer dollars is not
are you
competition.
talking about competition
Socialism,
with
sir.
Cocoa Riverfront, or what are you talking about?
Any private venue that would otherwise hold these. There are many of
There are
them
no
across
private
Florida.
venues of any compromise anywhere in Merritt Island, and this is one point of being able to do something special to an expansive city that does not have a downtown. It's part of a spot which will be bring more and more tourists and more Floridians and more enjoyment for the county into the Veterans Memorial Park with that expansion.
I understand, but you claim there will be 284,000 visitors. That's far more than the population of what is in Merritt Island. So
that was
therefore,
the
you're in competition
projection.
with other areas of
That
Brevard
was the
County.
projection over at a couple of years of regular concerts, regular events, key lime pie festivals, and many more things going on. We average over 1,000 Boy Scouts camping out every year. And that number will grow. There's all kinds of things that can happen from there. But, you know, it's, I can't,
So you mentioned,
Answer
to
that
follow
in
up, you mentioned the Brevard County Symphony Orchestra has looking at their,
Yeah.
the Brevard, my understanding is the Brevard County Symphony Orchestra currently is at the King Center.
the King Center.
What will be the impact on the King Center with the loss of a tenant?
I think the Brevard County Symphony Orchestra, as I talked to them, as they were a partnership and are raising this whole issue and getting as many partners as we could to participate with this program, their focus is they will be able to do more concerts, more symphonies, more activities with different groups. They won't not do the King Center, but they will be able to do a lot more things in the county. That was their interest, to my knowledge, but you'd have to ask them directly.
We'll talk about them a little bit later. They come up, I believe, on the cultural grant. I really appreciate, again, your dedication, but clearly there was no methodology. The numbers clearly were picked randomly out of the air. When you come up with numbers like
I object to
284,000,
that.
if
I
the
object to that.
methodology can't.
Let's hold the crosstalk if
Sure.
we could, and I apologize,
fair.
but I think some of the questions, Commissioner Tobias, may be best directed to staff. I know Larry Lallo, our Director of Myra, is in the back. I see Peter here, our Tourism Director. And frankly, I don't have a problem, given the nature of your questions, if Mr. Weaver wants to essentially phone a friend, but not necessarily pull the audience on it.
Sorry, I thought he was the spokesman for this project.
No, I'm not saying he's not. I don't know necessarily to what degree they've, within his organization, deemed him to
Yeah,
be the...
I get it. I'm sorry. I just
no,
assumed if someone came asking for $1.27 million, they would be prepared to answer these type of questions.
Again, we've been working on it for 2 years. We applied 3 times, and this last time was the time that we were by the TDC, given that, and we did work closely with Myra over the whole time, but we are not the experts on how many people will occupy how many beds and all the other issues that you bring up. But we support those numbers because Myra did employ a tourist organization to do all the research. So,
Thank you for your service, sir.
thank you.
And Peter, let me ask you, sir.
Yes, sir.
If you could help me out, and I understand, as I believe I mentioned at the introduction of the item, that this was unanimously recommended less one. To my understanding, the one that objected simply wanted a different allocation amongst these 3 projects, but still supported these projects.
That's
Is that
correct,
a fair
sir.
statement?
Yes, sir.
To your understanding, and I imagine you were at the meetings that I was not, because I'm not on TDC this year, but has there been a discussion within TDC, either at the subcommittee, the Capital Facility Subcommittee, and/or with TDC as a whole, with respect to room nights and the reasonableness and the methodology used?
There was some discussion, nothing really detailed. Obviously, the committee did the work in terms of reviewing the application, and they felt it was acceptable. And as it went to the TDC, there was, a number of people who I look at as experts, hoteliers, and people that, work in the industry, seem to concur with that. So I would say, they had a brief discussion, but I think they accepted the numbers as were presented.
And let me ask you as well, and I don't care who it is, quite frankly, but as I understand it, each commissioner has at least one appointee on the TDC, and their appointee on the TDC in kind appoints folks on the various subcommittees within the TDC, including capital facilities. Is that fair?
That's correct, sir.
So given that there was no one opposed to allocating this, would it be a fair statement that every one of the commissioners, every commissioner's appointee on TDC and their respective appointees on the Capital Facilities Committee they were all satisfied with the level of detail that was provided?
Yes, sir.
I appreciate it. Okay, so we'll have Mr. Carnesale come up.
Mr. Chair?
Sir, please.
May I please ask a question?
Yes, absolutely.
Peter, can you explain the 75 score that was set in place?
So the committee, several months before the actual applications open, review the guidelines, and then they review the scoring methodology. So they were the ones that actually established the 75. They were the ones that actually established all the guidelines for the application itself. And
Okay,
then during the conversation about the different scoring, they determined that they wanted to waive the scoring because they felt that there was enough evidence to support that.
Okay, I'm confused. So they supported the 75, but when they saw the returns come back at this one, for example, scored 67, I think. Am I wrong? 60, substantially lower than a 67.78. So when they saw the results, they decided to waive it. What did they waive it to, out of curiosity, or did they just do away with the methodology
They
altogether?
basically threw the scoring out as far as the low score.
I understand. So why do they do scoring if they're not going to count the score? I know that isn't your job, but you were there and I wasn't.
Yeah, I think, the rationale, the discussion that was occurring at that meeting was they felt there was enough evidence and enough detail in the applications to support the grant. They felt the way that it was allocated, they used the scores as a percentage in order to determine the actual allocation, and that was what the commissioner, chair, was referring to earlier. They decided that the number one score should get a 10% bump because of being in that position and being a project that had been previously approved by the board. So that was their rationale for how they allocated those funds.
Okay, just to be clear, because that was, and I appreciate the level of detail. Not us. The board came up with a minimum score of 75. They scored it without input of any of the commission up here. It scored below their minimum score, not our score, and then they decided to do away with the scoring altogether, or to bump it up 10% just so it made that 75. Is that's fair to say?
I think what he's asking is, did they totally do away with the scores, or did they simply erase the floor?
They erased the floor, yeah.
They erased the floor, so the lowest score.
Yeah, they basically said that they were going to throw out the 75 as a low score option and just go with the allocation of what the percentages were. So if they scored 67 and that was 25% of the total, that's what they allocated.
Thank you. It sounds like the methodology was the exact same to determine the number of annual visitors they would get. It cannot be, no rhyme or reason. Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it.
So again, Peter, you were there, I wasn't, as far as the subcommittee and the TDC discussion on these items. And if you don't remember, that's fine. I don't expect everyone to remember everything that happens 24/7. There's certainly some things that stand out and some that don't. But when the discussion, which I assume took place with respect to the elimination of the condition precedent, if you will, of hitting that threshold score, when that took place, I mean, do you recall whether there was concern that they still accomplished the mission that they're set out to? Because, I mean, when I look at this, when I saw that they erased the floor, I figured, okay, because I knew they had the issue the last time they went and evaluated projects,
Right.
and they came back with essentially nothing.
Correct.
And if we have a capital facilities committee, my thought is that they would want the funding that's available to them within that particular bucket of the overall TDT. They would want that to go toward things that count as capital facilities, and they're going to take the best available, but they don't necessarily have control over the applicants that may or may not come in. Is that
Yeah, that's fair to
essentially the
say, yes,
gist?
sir. Mhm.
Okay, and I apologize for, and I'm not trying to put words in your mouth if that's
No.
not how it went down, but
No,
I just,
I think there was a discussion about the fact that, there was $3.75 million sitting in that account, and they didn't award anything last year. They had a detailed discussion about that. We felt that financially we were okay. We had the money actually there in that fund to be allocated, and they felt that even though they didn't hit the scoring floor, they still felt that they were viable projects and they were worthy projects.
I appreciate it, sir. All right, Commissioner Tobias, if it's all right, unless you have more questions for Peter at this point, I'll have Mr. Carnesale come up. All right, Mr. Carnesale? Thank you. I'm sorry to kind of seesaw with you a little bit here.
Not a problem. Pete Conasal, Viera, Florida. Okay. Basically, I'm kind of in favor of this, which is usually what I'm not usually arguing. Okay. And part of that is in answer to Mr. Tobia's question of where did we get the numbers, all right? And I believe what he's saying in terms of that the numbers that he used were the ones that went directly into the museum, all right? However, I know that I belong to MOA, the VFW, the DAV, the American Legion. All of those facilities use his venue now, even before he increases anything. So we use the venue for things other than the museum. We use for events and such. So the numbers would be greatly higher because there's also Boy Scouts and whatever, which I'm not part of, but also use the venue. So when he's indicating he's got this higher number that we're trying to question as to where it came from, I don't doubt that number at all. And basically, we're referencing, I know I'm active with MOA, I'm active with the VFW, I'm active with the DAV. I'm a member of the American Legion, not so active. Okay. However, I've attended events that have occurred on Merritt Island. I don't live on Merritt Island, so if we're talking about just the people from Merritt Island going to Merritt Island, that is false. Okay, obviously, if I'm from East Viera, I do not live in anywhere near Merritt Island. However, I do go to their events. So I believe it will attract people from elsewhere. And that's basically my stance on that.
I appreciate it. You know, and I'll just kind of dovetail from something you mentioned, Mr. Carnesale. I've been at the Veterans Memorial Center a number of times. I can't say 100 times, that's not true, but certainly I would say at least a dozen times over the past year and a half or so. And I don't live in Merritt Island. My office is in Merritt Island, but I live in the Ledge, out here in Rock Ledge. And it certainly has attracted me there. So, you know, you can count me amongst those folks. And sometimes I'm going in the museum, and sometimes I'm going in for a meeting or for an event that's in their room off to the left. I can't think, Don, what the name of that room is.
Gray Hall, where we ran out.
The hall, yeah. But I've been there a number of times, and the funny thing, and I understand that it's anecdotal. I'm not gonna say otherwise. But when I go there, even during odd times, sometimes maybe middle of the day during the week for events, the fact is that that parking lot has a lot of activity. It's not as empty as one would assume. Perhaps except for evenings after working hours or weekends. So I've seen it myself. Again, I acknowledge it's anecdotal, but the flow of people there has been notable, at least to me. So for whatever it's worth, Mr. Carnesale, I tend to agree with you on that point. All right, we don't have any further public comment cards. All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Pritchett, which I will happily second. Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would hope there would be someone here for the Eternal Flame. I mean, they're asking for $715,000.
Would you like to come up,
I do
sir?
have some questions.
And I understand that this is kind of a passionate subject for all involved, but if we could just try to avoid the crosstalk, I would certainly appreciate it. I know the folks sitting over there that are taking the minutes would as well. I promise I will give both of you ample time to ask questions and respond to them.
I would start off saying that we have been at the north end of the county since 2003. We have annually brought in between 400 and 800 room nights just with our memorial service that we do every May. We serve law enforcement across the country, not just locally and not just in Florida. We have visitors from across the country on a regular basis, whether it is our law enforcement family survivors, whether it is our disabled law enforcement officers that we serve, or whether it is just law enforcement who we support or others who support law enforcement and law and order. So we have, in the years since we've been there, we have never approached the committee for anything previously. We built our own building, we've maintained it, we have tried to be good citizens and serve the needs of law enforcement and the community, and this is really the first time we have developed anything that we really are passionate about, that we believe is going to have national impact and will attract people from across the country.
Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, I'm sorry, I did not catch your name for the record.
Tara Engel.
Ms. Engel. Thank you for being here. I did read your packet, and you said you expected 100,000 visitors in year one. So my question was, is that meant to be a delta over the 40,000 you get? So you'd have 140,000, which would represent 350,000,
No,
350% increase, or a total of 100,000, which would just be a 250% increase.
We were looking at, we currently have about 50,000.
Your packet says 40, ma'am.
Okay.
It's what you provided us, ma'am.
Okay, well, the materials I have here, which is what I gave to the committee, said 50. And that is between the museum, the shooting range, and our other activities and facilities like our simulator, et cetera, and our regular classes. So what we did was we took that 50%, or that 50,000, and we estimated out of that, we looked at, let's see here, because I've got different figures here. Hold on just a second. We factored our current average of 950 visitors per week and a growth rate of 15% for the first 3 months, 20% for the next 3, and 25% in the third quarter, with 30 in the fourth, giving us around 110,000 attendants the first year after completion. And our statement was that we felt this was reasonable given our marketing plans and the anticipated growth based on those marketing plans, the involvement of TV's John Walsh, and the uniqueness of the project, coupled with our built-in audience of roughly 5 million law enforcement and family members across the country. And we did work closely with our project builders, Rush Construction, and others to try and come up with those figures, as well as drawing from information from the American Alliance of Museums with regard to the heads and beds figures that we produced, estimating that about 25,000 of the 50,000 we see annually are actually out-of-town visitors, and estimating that 10% of that number, which is the American Alliance of Museums number, would actually be heads and beds, although we know that Downs and St. Germain also estimate that as many as 37% of visitors spend the night when they come to an attraction. We also factored in the fact that that attraction is a nighttime attraction, and we are hoping to draw people who will come over, have dinner, stay for the light show, and then spend the night in the community and do something else the next day.
Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's not a question. I do want to thank you for your answer, because I think a lot of thought, a lot of math, and a lot of non-anecdotal evidence went into coming up with yours. It was not included in your packet, but clearly it was done. But it also draws to light the rest of this board that it was not done at the amphitheater. That was the type of response, the one that required thought, the one that required actually putting stuff down on paper to provide confidence in us spending that type of money. So, ma'am, thank you so much for your detailed response.
And this information was provided to the TDC
it was not provided in the packet that made it to us. And I'm not questioning any of it. I'm saying thank you for providing it. Clearly, you had a strong handle on it. And I'm not going to support it, but I appreciate the
we appreciate your honesty.
1 sec, Ms. Engel. Commissioner Nardi, do you have a question for her?
And could you just, for the record, talk about how much of that project is funded at this point, if
Yes.
you were awarded this money?
We have, hold on, I think I've got those figures too. We have commitments from 2 of our sister organizations that are currently funding us with $25,000 a year each, so that's $50,000. That's over a 10-year period. We are estimating our brick sales will come in at about $1.5 million. We have about $500,000 in other funds. So we're looking at somewhere around 2.5 to 3.5 that we are going to be able to produce ourselves, in addition to what you folks would be giving us.
And how much is the total cost of that
The-
project?
Well, the total cost, it's a three-phase project. So the initial phase that we're working on right now is going to be, I believe it's $4 million, and that is for the Eternal Flame.
Okay. So this is just for the flame?
This is for the flame. We have approached the state of Florida because the third phase of the project is actually going to be a museum expansion so that we can focus on our STEM programming. And we are looking at getting a grant from them for that. And then we have several other organizations that have indicated that they will support the down the road aspects of the project as well.
Thank you.
I just want to say I appreciate your having reached out to me. It's been at least 6 months, I think, since we first talked about this, maybe even a year at this point, and then having followed up with me. It was good to be able to meet with you at least a couple times at the location to look at what it was that you were proposing on the site. I can tell you this, to a similar degree with the Veterans Memorial Center, even though it's not in the city that I live in, I've gone there, obviously for totally different reasons. I don't go to the vet center to go shoot. I think that might cause some chaos over there. But certainly I appreciate that you guys have a shooting range. I'm actually equidistant between yours and one. I'm not going to mention your competitor today, even though they're very
That's
good
okay.
as well.
We have to split your time evenly.
All right, Commissioner Pritchett?
Yeah, I'd like to also mention, you guys keep such a quality location there. I think you've done a great job with the Police Hall of Fame and these things that you're adding. I do believe that it is going to be a big draw for a lot of visitors. It's right off of the Cape as well, when we have all those space visitors. But I just want to thank you for all that you're doing, and I thank you for this vision. I think it's going to be quite a substantial landmark that I think is going to draw a lot more of the police and law enforcement community here, because I think this is going to be their place to do those things. So,
Well, and I have to say, in this day and age, with everything that's happening nationally, the feedback that we've gotten from our law enforcement families, and really just from those nationally who support law enforcement, has been extremely encouraging and extremely positive and extremely complimentary of Brevard County. So it speaks well of us that we will be the hosts to something that I think will have national significance.
yeah, and I also want to mention the veterans area you guys have. I've been there a lot. It's excellent. It's really nice.
We love the veterans, too.
Yeah. And I just want to say that Lori Wilson Park needs a lot of love. So,
Yeah. And I'll just say on that front, Commissioner Pritchett, I really tried to play ball, understanding where we are fiscally a couple months ago when we looked at it and adjusted the allocation. This still doesn't get us to where we were, so I've tried to be reasonable given the environment that we're in. But that said, I certainly support this, hence the reason that I seconded it. We do have a couple other cards that have come in over the time we've had the speakers, though, so I'll call them up. First up, Larry Lallo, who's the Executive Director of Myra. Then we have Wendy Ellis from Merritt Island, who's on Myra. Commissioner Tabaya?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The third one I hadn't gotten to is Lori Wilson Park. So since we're dealing with another one right now, with your acceptance, I'll just wait.
Yeah, that's all right, absolutely. What I'll do is I'll just leave this on there. I'm not going to clear it off, so I'll keep it up. All right. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to come up. I'm sorry I left Don out there hanging out there. He was intending to speak mainly on the benefit to the veterans. Myra was involved in the projection analysis. We didn't take it lightly, recognizing that anytime you go about projections, it's based on your assumptions, of course. We interviewed two major promoters from the area. We looked at the production in the cocoa facility. This facility was modeled after a facility in Mayfield Village, Ohio. We interviewed the manager there and how he got to his attendance of 4,000 average per event from 200. We sat down with the veterans and we created this large spreadsheet of items that they knew they were already doing or planning on doing. And we sat down with the promoters and we looked at 26 major events a year. What would those major events, if we had a regional and somewhat of a national act from time to time, what could they bring in based on benchmarks that we were actually asked to provide to the TDC from 6 other venues? And then we came up with 4,000 average attendance at each of those 26 major events, plus about 20 or 30 other events throughout the year. And what really sparked this in the beginning was the fact that the veterans, there's 70,000 in this county, they hold their events on a flatbed trailer over there at Veterans Memorial Center. And that's really what sparked it. And then we had to look at, I'd agree with you, Commissioner Tobias, the sustainability is an important component. And we also recognize that this isn't something that the veterans could handle on their own. Although they have 70 volunteers, this is going to require some professional management in order to get the numbers to the benchmarks that we were researching. So that's another aspect that we did address somewhat in our application. So I just wanted to clarify it wasn't something we just kind of pulled out of our hat. I do have, if you want to see the spreadsheet analysis and some of the assumptions, I'd be glad to send them to you.
Any questions for Larry, Commissioner Tobias?
No, I wish you the best of luck, because if you hit your numbers, I'm just doing this on my, you hit your 4,000 at 26 events, and then you double that, assuming your minor ones turn into major ones, and then you add in the numbers that you're currently having, not to your museum, but total, you'll still be below the numbers that you presented. And that was just adding the numbers up that you just provided us with. So it looks like you've got the votes here. I wish you the best of luck. Just to recall, there is no clawback on this.
Okay, well, all right, thank you very much.
Great. Ms. Ellis, good to see you, ma'am. And I'll give you a heads up as you're coming up here. This will be on probably the next or maybe a couple agendas up. I am going to be reappointing at least one of the individuals who's on Myra back to Myra. And then I'm going to be appointing two new ones. You're going to have two Jacks in all likelihood, Jack Ratterman and Jack Smink. So as a heads up.
Good evening, Commissioners. I just wanted to share that the grant application that was created by the TDC was very detailed and very professional. The meetings were very extensive, and a lot of great questions were asked, both pre and post scoring by the members of both the Capital Facilities Committee and the TDC. They all took their job very seriously. Over 100 hours of Myra staff time has gone into responding to the proposal that the TDC created. It was very extensive and very detailed. Today we're excited to bring what we consider to be a new major tourist attraction for your funding consideration, the Veterans Memorial Amphitheater. Myra is very excited to be part of this collaborative project with the veterans. The amphitheater site is located just off State Road 520 with an average traffic count of over 48,000 vehicles per day. It's the perfect beach connector for hotel rooms. This amphitheater site legally will accommodate 9,680 people. Important in the age of COVID, the highly desirable 2-acre outdoor venue features over 87,000 square feet. Nowhere else in Brevard County will you find an open outdoor space that's designed from the beginning for social distancing. Period to date, Myra has invested $3.825 million in Veterans Park, of which $2 million created stormwater ponds. An extremely important element for an amphitheater because the ability for frequent outdoor usage is directly tied into a drainage plan. Unlike any other major outdoor venues in Brevard, even with heavy rains during the day, we'll be able to hold an event at this venue the very same night. This site was engineered to stay dry during a 24-hour storm. There could not be a more desirable site for an outdoor amphitheater. In October of this year, we broke ground on the remaining $1.825 million in Myra improvements, including walkways and bridges around the lakes, lighting, electrical, and a substantial tree landscape plan that does not impede the amphitheater plan, and additional parking lot off of a second entrance. The amphitheater is close to being a shovel-ready site. In bringing you this project, we feel like we've put our money where our mouth is by investing over $4.5 million in Veterans Park. We think we have the opportunity to invest in a win-win for Brevard County tourists, residents, hotels, restaurants, and retailers. We're thrilled to be part of the winning team, and we appreciate your consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ellis. I'll just say as well, just as I do have faith in the folks that I put on the different committees, including TDC, and by extension who they choose to put on the subcommittees, I do have confidence in Myra overall. I think you've got a great group of folks there. Even with the changes that are anticipated, I think it'll stay as good or perhaps be even better if that's possible. But everything that I've heard from the folks that I have reached out to, that I trust for their advice on this, has been universally positive. I can tell you, again, fully admitting that it's anecdotal, when I go to these places, what I see does have an impact on how I vote. And I just cannot imagine that this will not be a major tourism driver. Do I know whether something's going to bring 40,000 versus 100,000? No, I don't know that. I can't eyeball something and say, well, that's a 35,700 person tourism driver. I don't have the ability to do that, but I do have the ability, based on not living under a rock, being in this area, working in this area, living in this general area. In this case, I don't live in Merritt Island, I live in Rockledge. I see what the situation is on the ground. I understand, based on having been at these locations a number of times, where there's room for improvement, where there are potential deficiencies, and where we have essentially a diamond that hasn't been cut yet. And I think that's what we're dealing with at this point. We've got the diamond that's still encrusted with the rock. We've just got to get it to someone that can chisel that and make it into something prettier than it already is. But I appreciate your coming out. Commissioner Tobias, do you have anything for Ms. Ellis?
I think I made my point pretty clear on this one.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ellis.
Thank you so much for your support and your support of Myra, Mr. Chairman. We
All the time.
appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, so we do have a motion and a second.
I'm sorry, I hadn't yet spoken on Lori Wilson.
I apologize.
Mr.
That's
Chair.
right. Commissioner Tobias, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we're going to vote on these in a group, and this is the reason why. Lori Wilson is the most difficult one for me, clearly. That may not be the case with everyone else, but this started, whether you know this or not, with Commissioner Barfield. Commissioner Barfield was the one that had the very bright idea, and I believe I was on the wrong side of this vote when it came, was to use TDT dollars for parks. And it only could be used for certain parks. And I spent a little bit of time looking at the TDT language as well as the parks that it could be used for. And staff provided me with these numbers that I've all passed out to you guys. These are the parks that would meet the TDT definition the same way that they meet the definition for Lori Wilson Park. These parks now are funded largely out of general fund. So as we move forward, here is an opportunity for us to save precious general fund dollars, because I guarantee you that we are going to hear from the sheriff needing more resources, or we're going to hear that fire rescue needs more resources when it comes to contract negotiations. Here is an opportunity for them, not a diminutive amount. If you look at this, we're talking more than $2 million a year. Yes, some of that comes from MSTU, but a great portion of that comes out of general fund. Unfortunately, it requires us to make some tough decisions now. And these tough decisions now are to say to the Veterans Park, yes, that's a worthy cause, but maybe an amphitheater isn't important as paying fire rescue an adequate amount so they stay there. And before you say they come out of two pots of money, they don't. All we have to do by ordinance is change the allocation of TDT dollars. We can do that with a 4/5 vote and then allocate these dollars to fund these parks to free up general fund dollars, which we can spend on anything. We can do it in 2 meetings, but again, it requires us to say no to things like a 10-story flame. Because I'm going to say no when next year, should I be elected, and people come and ask for more salary, I'm going to sit up here, you can quote me, sorry, we put up a blue flame, we have an amphitheater, and we made those decisions as a board. So I think this is the best reason that we probably should say no to these projects and focus in on the core functions of government like public safety and infrastructure. But it requires that to be done now. And I've told you a way to do it. I would really appreciate your support on this. I imagine our public safety would really appreciate your support on this. I'm sorry that's a plea, but we're talking somewhere in the magnitude of $3 million right now. So this is kind of important. Mr. Chair, thank you for that aside. I greatly appreciate your indulgence.
Sure. And Commissioner Pritchett, after you're done, I've got a few things I'd like to chime in with.
Yeah, I just want to mention, if Florida's based on tourism, if we don't get a good share of tourists here, the impact on our general fund is going to be harder, because we're going to have to try to pick up the extra things that we're not getting from the tourism dollar. So I think any time that we can develop things that draw tourists to the area and increase the beauty of our area, people are going to want to come to nice places to visit. That's why I think Cocoa Beach needs a little more love. But I think that's important things to do, because, that's Florida, that's what we do. So when you can develop these things that draw large groups of people in, I know we're always trying to figure out new ways. We have the Space Center, but we don't have beaches in District 1, so we're always trying to think of creative ways to where we can start helping with that tourist tax, get them more funds, so we start sharing the love around the county. But I think this is wonderful. I think it's a good return on investment, and it takes the pressure off all of the rest of the homeowners. So that's where I'm at with this. Anytime we can get a good return on investment and it works. If we don't, I expect us to come up with creative ideas to try to redistribute the funds. But I think you do have a great committee right now. I like my appointment. And so I think right now I'm very happy with what you've come back with. I hope we have more tourist tax dollars later. I know we took a hit on that as far as the sales tax and the tourist dollars, but I'm hoping we have a comeback here soon. And smart work. I think it's good. Totally support it.
All right, I'll jump in on a few things. And I'm not looking to have a back and forth, so I'll try to temper my comments to the degree that I can. With respect to public safety salary, I don't think our vote on this has anything whatsoever to do with it. I can just tell you, looking at the fire guys that are sitting in the audience in decent numbers at this point, I'm not supporting this with the idea that I'm going to slight you in any way. This, to me, is totally separate. I can get into why I think it's separate and why I don't think this is going to impact it if you all want at any time. Beyond that, a couple thoughts. With respect to the proposal that the TDT would potentially best be used to maintain or improve parks, in part, I think that's a good argument. I think there's potentially some logic to that. But looking at the actual request that we have that we're voting on today, Lori Wilson, County Park, Veterans Memorial Center, Park, County Park, 2/3 of them are county parks that we're talking about. The Police Hall of Fame, as far as one of the arguments against one of the former items that I mentioned, is we don't want to compete with private industry. Well, Police Hall of Fame isn't a government organization by any means. These are all good organizations or good venues to drive tourism. Now, I'm not going to claim that I necessarily believe or don't believe the specific estimates that are put forth, but I think that these are the best options for driving tourism that are available to us. I think they're meaningfully going to impact the number of folks that come in here after they're constructed and after they're up and running. But do I really hold dear whether it's 60,000 versus 47,000 or anything of that sort? I don't know that necessarily makes a tremendous difference in what's driving me to vote. The one thing I will add, though, Commissioner Tabaya, with respect to your suggestion of reallocating a portion of the TDT, I would consider it to a degree, depending on what it is precisely you have in mind. I would ask maybe if you want to put a memo together and disseminate it in the way that Ms. Bentley advises you is most appropriate. I would be happy to look at it and give you my thoughts on whether I'd support it. I'm not willing to support it with respect to today's proposals. I think we're in an advanced stage with these, and I think that we have a lot that can be accomplished by supporting them now. But as far as future or subsequent years, I would be open to looking at a proposed change, not saying that I would or wouldn't support it, but I certainly have an open mind as to considering some degree of reallocation if it's something that can be articulated to be in the public's benefit. Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to weigh in here a little bit that I think Commissioner Tobias made some very good points, and I was kind of leaning his way, but then Commissioner Pritchett chimed in with her perspective and won me over. So I will support this.
All right. Any further discussion? I hear a click, but I don't see it. Commissioner Zardi.
Yeah, I'll just say you can tell it's election season, can't you?
I'm not running.
With all due respect, Commissioner
Yeah,
Tobias.
I'm happy I'm not in the
Obviously,
boat of having
obviously, these suggestions are great for the future, because had we had this option, or had we had this discussion before we went and asked these people to apply for these monies, maybe we'd be having a different discussion, because some of these monies do come from taxes, so these aren't even the actual totals of what we could potentially shift to these other parks. There is a return on investment, especially with like Lori Wilson Park and stuff. I love the American Police Hall of Fame. It's where I trained. It's where I, got my part of my certification for my concealed weapons. I think it's a great facility. Do I think we need to invest millions of dollars into a flame? I think, I would much rather see that money used towards scholarships, but that's not what this is for. This is capital facilities. But if you don't like the structure of it, let's talk about changing it before we get this far. None of our appointments, my appointment was opposed to it only because of the percentage, he wasn't opposed to any of the projects. But I know Commissioner Tobias' appointments, as well as other commissioners' appointments, all were in support of these projects as well. So, tourism dollars should be used for tourism expenses, and these are capital facilities expenses, so I'll be supporting it.
All right, speak now or forever hold your peace. Last call. All right, I'll go ahead and call the question. All in favor of approval, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nay. All right, passes 4-1 with, you guessed it, Commissioner Tobias in the negative. I do congratulate you on sticking to your convictions on this, though. I mean, you did raise some valid points that I think certainly have a degree of merit. So,
in deference on the political issue, I just said no to veterans and no to police. So probably I'm on the other side, just to be very, very clear of where many of my constituents would be. It's just sticking to conservative principles.
I'm just happy I'm not in a campaign this year. Commissioner Zardi?
But you really didn't, because you went out on a limb for fire, so you could argue that easily too.
Well, we'll see about that shortly.
All right, we can put an octagon or whatever it is out back and get the boxing gloves if you guys are so inclined later. But for now, we're going to move on. So item J is in Juliet 4. Peter, if you would please, sir.
Sure, absolutely. And as a shameless plug, I will concur with Commissioner Pritchett. 30% of sales tax is paid for by tourists. So if we don't have those, that's a percentage of money that we're going to be losing. So just thought I'd throw that out there. J4 is, again, the TDC's recommendation to award $175,000 to 40 groups. I will say this took a lot of work on the part of the committee. I did not go through as much detail of looking at every one of those 40 applications. I know some about some of them, but the committee really committed, and they were the ones that did the scoring, and then, of course, the TDC supported it. So both of those votes were 7-0 at the committee and at the TDC level.
All right, Commissioner Tobias.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have to start, Mr. Kranis. You interjected. You said 30% comes from sales tax, out of curiosity?
30% of sales tax is paid for by those that come
My
from
question is,
outside
what
of
percent of our
Brevard.
budget comes from sales tax? It's a revenue source for the state. Yes, we do have a half penny that goes to the lagoon.
That's
yes,
right.
we do have a half penny that I hope people don't vote for that's got to go to schools. But our budget generally is not built on the backs of that. It is actually built on the backs of property taxes. So appreciate the interjection, but that's probably best saved for our state legislators. I wish more time would have been spent on cultural grants, in all honesty, for the reasons that I'm about to list. Now, some points I want to deal with this generally and then deal with my favorite. And there were too many to list, so I picked some good ones. Now that we all are faced with the complications of COVID, we as policymakers have to decide whether or not we're looking to attract out-of-county tourists in the short period. Some of these grants, for example, in the short period, appear to address street festivals. I don't know if that's something that we need to be looking for. In any case, the time that is highly likely we will have to deal with reduced tourism tax revenue over the coming months and years, it seems far more prudent to use this $175,000 on core marketing for Brevard, such as social media and billboards. It's my understanding that our core marketing budget may continue to see reductions as we move forward. And yes, marketing is something that does come from tourism, but that's ancillary to the general fund. And 3 is a point that Commissioner Pritchett brought up, and I think thankfully she did, as did Chair Lober in the past. If we do believe that we want out-of-county visitors, we are brought back to the same question we faced last time when we looked at this at March. We should be putting verifiable agreements in place that taxpayers receive what they're paying for. In other words, an ROI evaluation before these grants and a follow-up to ensure that we're actually attracting tourists. As I mentioned, Commissioner Lobers mentioned this last March. I watched the tape. He said he would second a motion. I failed to make it. So I appreciate him for doing that, and I am ashamed that I did not follow up on that. I've spoken with Mr. Kranis, and he says that an ROI would be useful, and his office has started to work on it. I believe it would be premature to hand this $175,000 out before we get that ROI. Now, I imagine some of you are concerned with many of these organizations. Rest assured, regardless, these organizations have already received, and I request this, and I believe this was sent out to your office, county grants this year through CARES funding. In fact, CARES grants to these organizations that have already been approved in the amount of $197,250. That is almost $25,000 more than the total grants that they're now requesting. And this is very important. This does not include direct federal funding that they may have received through PPP or other sources. Most importantly, while I understand that the TDC Cultural Subcommittee is made up of volunteers, and I hate to be a little bit blunt here, the work product vetting these grants has been poor at best. I asked the TDO for the applications, and here are some of the examples that I found. Here are some good ones. I'm sure you guys read all of these, so are aware of this. But
do you want a drum roll?
Yes. So I put these in no apparent order. Be Unique magazine listed that 57% of the county visitors would come from outside the county. However, they do not list an event. So 57% of zero will actually be showing up. The second one that I got to is the Cultural Brevard Art Association lists as their out-of-county visitor rate 30%, fair number. But then I kept on reading the narrative, and their narrative says, quote, not having geographical demographics, it is difficult for us to say whether residents or tourists are being reached. In other words, they directly admit to making up that 30%. Here's a good one. The Melbourne Main Street has a 800% increase in administrative fees. It's also of an interesting note that the mayor of that town might have hired a family member that may account for a large percent of that 800% administrative cost, but they're seeing a revenue drop of 60%. The Brevard Achievement Center. This organization has a budget of $30 million. I'm sure you know this, but the percentage of out-of-county attendees is, and I quote, Florida. They didn't even put a number. And I saved the last for the Florida Historical Society. If anyone should know anything about Florida's population or Brevard's population, it probably should be the Florida Historical Society. They, according to their numbers, they are 14 million attendees. It gets better. 90% of these are out of county. Now, my math is bad, but that leaves 10% that are in county. 10% of 14 million is 1.4 million. Unfortunately, Brevard County only has a little over 600,000 residents. Now, unless every one of us interact with this 3 or 4 times, I'll tell you I haven't interacted with it, so someone has to have interacted with it 7 or 8 times. These numbers are ridiculous. These numbers are fictitious, and these are only a few that I had the time to look over. So for all of these reasons and many more, and I know this is only $175,000, but I ask that we make a motion to reject the legislative finding that these events in Attachment A meet the requirements of Florida statute in that one of the main purpose of events is an attraction of tourists. By the way, I ran a search on a couple of these. A couple didn't even mention the word tourists at all. Either way, I leave the motion on the table, Mr. Chair.
All right, Commissioner Pritchett, then I'll jump in.
Thank you. Mr. Kranitz, let me ask you a question real quick, because I know we've done these in the past that I first got on board, I wanted to see receipts when they got done. And as far as this, I think a long time ago I was given the explanation that some of these funds that you collect are for community enjoyment as well. Is that correct?
I'm not exactly sure about that, ma'am. I don't know. I know that the 4% out of the TDT that's allocated for cultural activities is designated for this kind of purpose. So I don't know if the intent of that ordinance perhaps was to have some events that were for local benefit as well.
Okay, that would be an interesting question.
Yes.
If you would find out
Sure.
and see if we still have that theme or if we've changed themes, because that would be significant. When you guys get these, the committee runs through them, you guys get all the data, the information, correct?
That's right.
I look through them, I'm okay with them. We don't have as much up in the other district, but I can see that these are all substantial organizations, so I'm going to support them. But if that terminology is a little bit different, I would be interested in that as well, though.
Okay.
But thank you.
And I'll just add, with respect to that, I think that as long as what we're doing is lawful, there's no ethical reason that I'm aware that we shouldn't also at least keep in mind that some of these organizations benefit not only in the sense that they drive tourism, but they also are used by residents. And to me, I don't think it's wrong in any way to prioritize our residents, assuming we can check the boxes that we have to check to ensure that these are lawful expenditures. I will say, Commissioner Tabaya, I think I'm about halfway where you are. I'm not ready to reject this yet. I'm also not ready to accept it today. I would like to see more information on the ROI. I'm not going to support rejecting it today if that's the motion, and I'm also not going to support accepting it today if that's the motion. I just want more info at this point. So any motion that's made other than a motion that would be contingent on us getting an ROI eval, I'm going to reject. Commissioner Tabaya?
Thank you. And I wanted to answer the best I could, Commissioner Pritchett. According to state statute, we have to make a legislative finding that this deals with tourism. According to state statute, it reads, and I quote, "If tax revenue expended for an activity, service, venue, or event, the activity, service, venue, or event shall have as one of its main purposes the attraction of tourists." So we have to do this. And the fact that some of these, I went with the most ridiculous ones. I'm not going to, but at a basic level, when the applications don't mention the word tourists, and yet we have to make a legislative finding for tourists. Let's forget the numbers. They're crazy, and you probably understand them better than I do. I don't know that it meets that, and that's statute 125.0104, by the way. So that's what we have to make the determination, what we're making the determination now. And in my opinion, if you don't even mention what statute is requiring, I don't think that it's in our best or taxpayers' best interest to do so. So I hope that answers, your question about what statute has, and I'd be more than willing to share that with you.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Thank you, sir, and I would like that.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Kranis, I think I'm going to agree we're going to have to table this because I'm going to have to know about that definition right there. Thank you, sir. Because I know in the past when we've brought this up, we have talked about community enjoyment as well. So that's going to be interesting with this because I'm going to lean more to the side of having to figure that out. But otherwise, I would have voted to put this through right now unless you can tell me if these have to be solely driven by tourist attractions, or if it can be...
I think the way the state statute reads, it has to be a tourism purpose. It doesn't say solely.
Okay.
So, again, there's been, in the past, probably some leeway, and that's left to the county commission to make those kind of determinations. I think that was the intent of the state statute, was to push it down to the counties to kind of determine what is that purpose and what qualifies.
And Peter, let me ask you,
Can
I'm
I
sorry.
jump in
Oh,
one
yes,
more
ma'am,
time?
please.
Okay.
I apologize.
So in your opinion, do these things qualify for the purpose of these grants?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe almost all of them have some kind of attempt to go after a tourist market. And one of the ones that was mentioned, the Florida Historical Society, they do a radio show, and that's where their numbers come from. They do a radio show around the state, and they promote tourism around the state, particularly tourism here in Brevard. So the numbers that they included in there, while they're not visitation, those are the numbers of people they reach through their radio show, and I think that has some value in terms of driving business. The other thing, had been asked earlier about, how would I compare the ROI on these kinds of programs versus marketing? It's a very difficult question to answer, and every TDC and visitor bureau in the world always tries to put some numbers to that, and we're working on that, but it's difficult, and asked to develop an ROI model. It probably wouldn't be something I'd be back next month with. It's probably going to take some time to do that. But what I would say is that for those organizations that we were able to look at, cell phone data, and we could actually come up with a determination as to what visitation approximately occurred as a result of the event happening. So those are the kinds of things we're looking at. We don't have it for every one of these groups. Some of these groups are not doing a single event. They're doing things throughout the county, throughout the year, so it's a little harder to pinpoint, but we're trying to get to those numbers.
Okay, I do believe they're good for the economy. I know our children are getting ready to move back here as soon as he can get placed back into the area, but one of the things they're looking for is, I try to get them close to me, but they're more interested in looking for an area that has a little bit more of the arts and the culture. So, I get it that way. So, okay, if you're comfortable with it, I'm going to vote to put it through tonight. So, do we have a motion on the table already, sir?
So, actually, do we have a motion?
I made a motion, Mr. Chair. And Madam, Mr. Chair, second?
Please.
Yeah, the statute requires a legislative finding, and while I greatly respect Mr. Kranis, he's not a member of the legislative body, so while we value his opinion, it is ultimately our decision to make that determination, not that of Mr. Kranis according to statute.
Your motion was to reject legislative finding on this?
Yeah, and listen, I'm not going to win that one. I didn't, in all honesty, expect to win this one. I thought an ROI was a good suggestion, so I will, with your, I agree with you I will agree with you on that. It's best to wait. So I think Commissioner Pritchett preempts what my follow-up would be. So with your indulgence, I would pull mine and let Commissioner Pritchett go forward.
Sure, and I would just ask if there is a motion to table this, and I'm sorry to create any more homework for you, Peter, but I think one of the points that Commissioner Tobias brought up that is a really very good point is if the organization has a massive budget, giving them somewhere in the league of $2,000, $6,000, there's an opportunity cost to a smaller organization that might actually make some meaningful impact to. So if you could, in whatever spreadsheet we have, if you could give us a breakdown, at least of those that you're aware. I don't know if that was a field that they had to fill out when they were applying. If not, if you know that there are some that are particularly large, if they're, $10 million plus organization, that would factor in all likelihood, and whether, I think there's a value or likely to be an ROI in giving them $2,000 to $6,000.
Okay.
So we'll just see what the motion is. Okay, so Commissioner Pritchett has a motion just to straight approve. Is there a second? Dun, dun, dun. Okay, that fails for lack of a second. So in that case, Commissioner Tabaya, would you make a motion to continue this out until, is 11:10 satisfactory, or do you want it earlier?
I think Mr. Krennis said to develop some sort of model. He couldn't get that to us to our next meeting, which is at the end of the month. Will 11:10 provide you more? Can we say till such a time
Yes.
that Mr. Krennis can provide us with his recommendation for an ROI, considering the stipulations that you put in place,
And
budgets, all that good stuff?
Yeah, I think maybe the way to phrase that is to say that that staff is directed to endeavor to bring it back to the board at the earliest reasonable opportunity. Does that work?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, I'll go ahead. I'll second that motion. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of continuing this out accordingly, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously.
No, keep that. Okay.
All right, brings us to J5, Commissioner Tabaya. Yours again, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank the County Attorney's Office for working to help me draft this policy. And ultimately, this policy is one of parity. Right now, the IAFF union members are restricted from engaging in labor negotiations with members of the board under their agreed-upon bargaining agreement. All this does is place a similar restriction on us. This is particularly important because Brevard is lucky enough to have expert staff led by a former labor attorney, an HR director who has a law degree, and a superb county attorney's office. Second, this is not radical. Board members have to put disclaimers on communications to other government agencies and have to submit disclosures to quasi-judicial matters. It also is bound by sunshine law. All this policy would do is require commissioners to stop a conversation once a discussion veers into labor negotiations. This will, to be clear, no way infringe on the rights of union members who would like to discuss unrelated issues such as zoning matters with the commissioners. I believe it is also in the best interest of the county. While I'm not an attorney, I am sure any attorney will tell you it is generally a bad idea to have discussions with an opposing party who is represented by counsel without their attorney present or even getting their consent. Florida statute has created a system in which interests of taxpayers are best served by strong representation and formal negotiations. We have all these pieces to accomplish this. All we have to do is stick to it. This doesn't change anything. The only reason to vote against this is if you plan to facilitate behavior that would already represent a breach of the collective bargaining agreement. In other words, if you plan on entering into negotiations without the rest of the board, you're placing not only the negotiating team in a tough position, you are placing the rest of the board in a bad position, and ultimately the taxpayers. Commissioner Pritchett came up to a similar conclusion when she asked that communications from commission offices be sent out with a disclosure, which my office still does to this day. This is a similar type of policy, and I hope everyone joins me in supporting it.
Commissioner Tabaya, a few thoughts on that, since I don't see lights at this point. I'm sure we will have some, at least I would think so. I agree with some of what you said. I agree that it would be unfortunate, perhaps to say let's choose a diplomatic word, were we to do something that we're permitted to do, which would cause someone else under the county umbrella to do something they're not permitted to do. That said, I do want, and I have as a goal, to have first responders, especially those under our umbrella, I want them to be able to contact us with their concerns, whatever they may pertain to. I don't, frankly, like the existing restriction with the union. I have no desire to expand it, and in fact, I'd love to see it rolled back to a large degree, if not entirely, so that they would be free to communicate with us. As far as the analogy of there being an opposing party, yeah, technically, if you want to view it in the sense of a negotiation, sure, they are an opposing party in that sense. But this is not like someone that's out to get us. I think that our interests align in the sense that I, for one, and I think a majority of this board, hopefully the entirety of this board, want to see appropriate working conditions, appropriate wages, and reasonable treatment of the fire personnel. I don't think that that is an extreme statement by any means. So to the sense that yes, they are in that way an opposing party, they're not a traditional opposing party as one that doesn't share goals that we have. I think that we can work with them to accomplish quite a bit that benefits not just them, but also the county and by extension the constituents that we all have, taxpayers, residents, businesses, and so forth. So I don't see myself supporting this unless there's something new that's brought to light tonight on it. And as I said, I'd love to look at rolling back the existing restrictions, assuming that that's something that we can do and that the union would be amenable to doing as well. Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think we're on the same page. I see this as an equity position. The union agreed that they would not enter into negotiation with the board, thus circumventing our very high educated team. I just don't. I don't think we should put them at the disadvantage. I think we too should abide by that. The solution that you had is go directly to the commission. Unfortunately, that X's out our negotiating team altogether. My question is, you've mentioned many times before that you serve as a mediator.
Sure.
Would you ever, and I mentioned entering into negotiations without your attorney present. Is that something, I don't know the answer to this, and I probably shouldn't be asking the question, but
that's all right.
And you're an attorney, and I greatly appreciate the education and the experience that I don't have that.
I stayed in the Holiday Inn Express as well.
And pardon?
I stayed in the Holiday Inn Express as well.
It's a low blow, given the current situation.
I shouldn't say that. You're right.
Yes. But I think that places the rest of us that don't have that legal background at a disadvantage.
That's a subjective assessment. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. Commissioner Pritchett has a background that I don't have in being a CPA. Commissioner Nardi has a background that I don't have. Everyone has different skills that they have their particular strengths and weaknesses in. I'll freely acknowledge you are right. I would not generally advise someone negotiate on almost anything without their attorney, but there are occasionally truly extenuating circumstances. In the context of a criminal case, I wouldn't typically advise a client make an open plea to the court without knowing what the sentence is going to be. But there are circumstances in which doing just that is appropriate, and not only appropriate, but it pans out in the end in the decline, or in that case, the defendant's favor. It's hard to have hard and fast rules when it comes to legal questions in terms of strategy, because each situation is inherently unique. And to say that there's a rule that applies to all of them, unless it's something that's patently obvious, I don't know that I could make that jump. I mean, obviously, you shouldn't attack someone with a knife or a chair in any setting. That's a hard and fast rule. But as far as general strategy, it's tough to say. There are a lot of rules of thumb, but they're exactly that, rules of thumb.
And I understand your point, and I greatly agree with it. Education and experience is extremely important. And we have a labor negotiating attorney. We have an individual an HR that has acted in this role many times and ultimately has to bring their work product back to us. And any time that we enter into that with less experience, we are placing ourselves not in a fair position with those on the other end. If the labor union doesn't have the ability to come to us, I think that we probably should be put in that exact same position. That's all. All I'm asking is for absolute parity on this issue.
And I'm not going to spend too much time belaboring it. I've got to turn it over to a few of the other commissioners here. But just, the last thought with respect to parity, since you left with that, just as our sheriff has the ability to essentially shop proposals amongst each of us to determine whether or not it's even worth bringing forward and what the likelihood is, and to expound on the merits or the perceived merits that he sees in what it is that he happens to be looking at on a particular day, I think it would be useful to have the fire union able to do the same thing. And they may hear yes from me on certain things. They may hear no from me on certain things. It depends on what it is and what the circumstances are. But I think reducing or adding a further barrier when, frankly, I think we should be removing barriers rather than even maintaining them, I don't know that it necessarily helps. But I've got to go through the list here. Commissioner Isnardi, then Commissioner Pritchett, and then Commissioner Tabaya, and then Commissioner Smith. Commissioner Isnardi.
I just have a couple questions. One for Commissioner Tabaya.
Please.
Was there an incident or a concern that brought this forward? I just want to know if that's possible.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
Yes, fairness. I don't think it's...
No, but I mean,
Fa-
was there a commissioner that was acting outside of the state statute? The rules as they are now?
Again, fairness. I believe it is patently unfair that we place a limitation on the union that we don't place ourselves. So ultimately, that is what the issue is. Clearly, and I don't know the history of this, but clearly there must have been issues because the prohibition placed on the union on contacting the commission is located on page 1 of the collective bargaining agreement. So again, I don't know the history of it, but I do know its location.
So you want the commission to have the same rules as the unions have? I mean,
when it
essentially.
comes to negotiations during that period, that is absolutely correct.
Okay.
Equity.
All right, Commissioner Pritchett.
Yeah, County Manager, there's times that we come together as a group that we're allowed to talk. In city, they were called shade meetings. Here, they're called executive meetings.
Yeah, there's special rules that apply statutorily. The legislature has set up for union negotiations in Florida, and they are different than other types of shade meetings that are not in the sunshine, that are executive sessions.
Because I remember when 4 years ago when we got on, we had a couple of those to have a few discussions. I don't think we've had that in a while. I think a benefit would be, because Commissioner Tabaya, I don't disagree with you, because I think we need to be able to talk freely, make group decisions. And I think maybe a little bit of the communication, maybe we haven't been getting from county staff. I do trust you guys. Who does negotiation for county staff with the unions?
The chief negotiator is the human resources director, and then there's staff from fire rescue, public safety, and the county attorney's office and the budget office.
Wonderful. So I think, I don't disagree with you on this, Commissioner Tabaya, because I think sometimes one of us can maybe get in a place, and it might be more beneficial because we're allowed to do this, come together as a group and hear the negotiation. I think that would help us tremendously. So I do agree with what you're saying, Commissioner Tabaya, but I would also like to throw in a caveat that maybe we would have those once in a while and hear what's going on so you can get our input and we can hear what the negotiations are so that we can speak to it freely as a group, so we have one strong voice coming forward, because then we're all on the same page with our employees.
All right, Commissioner Tabaya, then Smith, then Isnardi.
Old light, Mr. Chair, I apologize.
Okay, Commissioner Smith, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just like to say that I don't have any objection to this proposal, but I think frankly, it's a solution looking for a problem that doesn't exist. And I see those come up every now and then. In the interest of not spending another half hour on this, I would like somebody to come up with a motion so that we can make a decision and just move on.
I've got one. I don't know that anyone else is going to like it. I would propose that we... Oh, Commissioner Isnardi, my apologies.
I was going to say something similar, but because if the rules are in place for the union, then they shouldn't be talking to us anyway. But if we need rules to behave like adults, then I guess we can impose those. I don't have a problem with the request itself. I've never had negotiation discussions with any union members. That's why I was asking why,
And it
if
would be
there was a.
counterproductive if we did. We're not the negotiating.
But what I'm
person,
saying
arm
though
of
is,
the
I
county.
don't, that's why I was asking where this came from, because I have not even heard inklings that there was been a problem with it. So I was kind of curious as to why we need to self-impose more rules on us when the rules are already in place. But I'm fine with it. I'm not opposed to it. Obviously, if negotiations go south and we have a hard time, maybe that's something we can have a workshop about and talk about it in the open if need be. But as it stands right now, I mean, I don't have a problem with this.
Commissioner Tabayan, I doubt you're going to love this, but it certainly would ensure your goal of parity on this. I would propose that folks consider offering a motion directing staff to research what need be done to remove the limitation on negotiation from the union. Then we'd be in the same boat.
Commissioner, that's done in negotiations. So if you wanted to do that, the appropriate time to do that, we would do that in an executive session to give us direction on how the board wanted to proceed, similar to what Commissioner Pritchard had mentioned.
We're already under a collective bargaining
Yeah.
agreement right now that is currently in effect, so that's a non-starter. Your analogy, unfortunately, with the sheriff and that of the union, while on the face is good, unfortunately, according to statute, it's absolutely horrific. There is collective bargaining is encapsulated in statute, so the agreement between this legislative body and that of organized labor is much different than this as a legislative body and that of the sheriff. So again, it sounds good, but a statute is completely, utterly, and totally opposed on those two issues.
So to that extent, Ms. Bentley, if both parties agree to modify it, is there not a mechanism where they could modify it?
Not outside of the structure that's already established.
But within the structure, is there not the opportunity to call the two parties together to address whether or not a modification?
At the proper time in the negotiations.
Commissioner Pritchett?
Yes, sir. Are we currently in negotiations right now?
Yes, Commissioners, there's a new contract that would come into place in October, and those negotiations have started.
Can we have an executive meeting to discuss what it is we're negotiating? Would that be possible for the commission to come in?
Yeah, we are in a position to do that now that negotiations have started.
Okay, wonderful. I would
You want
like,
it, I'll call it.
yeah, I would like to do that. And another thing I would like to mention is I don't mind if we pass this or not. I'm not in any risk of violating it. It's like I'm not going to shoplift either. You could pass law on that. So I'm not going to violate this, sir. I agree with you on it. So whatever you guys want to do, I'm fine. But I'm not in any risk of violating this. So.
And, Mr. Chair?
Please, yes, sir.
Yeah, I think having an executive session cuts in the opposite direction of open discourse. This goal is to keep everything in the open, so an individual commissioner isn't going behind the backs of the bargaining unit, and by calling an executive session while legal, the union would not have the ability to know what is going on. So my suggestion, as I have done, is to meet with the negotiating team and make your opinion known to them, or to show up to any of the publicly noticed meetings, like the one that took place today at 1:30. So it's all done in the open, and I think that is probably the best. I guess I'm not going to go against an executive session, but I don't think that is fair to the union. So I hope that we could just address this and stay away from that.
So we can just
Real briefly, I see we have the union president. Mike, do you guys have any objection to us calling an executive session? No, sir. Okay, so that just to put it on the record, he's indicated they don't have an objection. So if Commissioner Pritchett chooses to change your mind and doesn't want it, that's fine. But
No, I would like to have one, because then we can have discussions of what they're asking. We can give input of what we agree to, and we come as a unified, commission up here, because we might want more or less, with it and help out with it. I think it's a good thing to do. I know Commissioner Isnardi, you served on city too. This is what we did, is we had these meetings, try to figure out how to help the employees. And I think it was very beneficial, because then we were all on the same page. So,
So I don't know that we've had a second on this, Commissioner Tobias. Have we had a second? I don't recall. Has anyone seconded this? I don't believe we've had a second. No?
Thanks for rumping into, Mr. Chair. In fairness, I didn't expect one on this one.
Well, I do agree the goal of parity is a good one, but seeing as there's no second, it appears to die for want of a second.
If I could see a purpose, I would,
Fair enough. I would ask if we could take maybe a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 7:04 on the dot. if we could. All right, so we're picking up where we left off. We're going to pick up on item J6, and you are on a roll, Commissioner Tobias, so I will let you continue there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. When the board voted for $8 million cash handout, 4 of the 5 of us were not sitting on this board. And I say this as a disclosure, even though I think it's very apparent. Not only am I against all cash handouts, I'm against most incentives as well, a sheet for parity. I learned through the Florida Today that Blue Origin would be mitigating 17 acres of impacted wetlands in Volusia County, yet they would be impacting wetlands here in Brevard County. Brevard County residents who are responsible for the $8 million incentive in the first place. So with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, I have a question or two for Mr. Denninghoff.
You can even ask 3 or 4 if you'd like.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I like the power tie.
Is that what it is?
It seems to be.
The orange part or the purple part?
No, the purple one.
Okay.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Mr. Denninghoff, the development of these wetlands may lead to additional runoff. Is that correct?
Yes.
The additional runoff in county-maintained drainage ditches could lead to additional flooding in North Merritt Island. Is that correct?
It is. The area that will be draining from the Blue Origin site runs to a pump station, which pumps out the area where the site is, and in heavy severe storm events, pumps it over a dike or a levee into the county system, which then goes into the North Merritt Island area.
Just a quick follow-up. Can you give me a rough estimate of the volume of that water that is discharged from that pump?
That particular pump runs between 30 and 40,000 gallons a minute.
And just as a reference point, how many gallons are there in a standard pool?
A residential pool has about 13,000 gallons in it.
Okay, so roughly almost 3 pools a minute of discharge from that one pump.
That's correct.
To boil this down, in other words, while Blue Origin may be following the law, this very well could have a negative impact on Brevard County residents, namely those in North Merritt Island, namely with flooding. Is that correct?
It could. That's correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Denninghoff. While this is federal land and therefore Blue Origin has no obligation to even give us their plan, let alone work with us, we as Brevard do have an obligation to the citizens. And this letter tries to do what little we can to protect their interests. Just because something is legal, that does not make it moral. So we have to make moral judgments regardless of the law, whether that be on issues such as abortion or the environment. So I passed out a letter, and I would ask that there be a motion that all we do is request the portion of the $8 million that has been handed out, which is roughly half, and the forgiveness of the other for the impact that may be felt for Brevard County residents. This is just a letter request, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pritchett?
I make a motion to deny.
I'll go ahead and second it. Commissioner Smith?
The motion to deny is supporting him. Okay, well, I've got several thoughts here. First of all, Commissioner Tobias, you were saying that the mitigation lands would be in Volusia County, but you're talking about flooding in Brevard County. I'm confused.
Mr. Chair?
Please.
And it's a good question. So what you have to do generally when you impact wetland is use mitigation bank. So if you impact 17 acres, you have to purchase 17 acres. So they're impacting 17 acres in Brevard County. Yes, it is on federal land, but it is in Brevard County. And they're buying 17 banked acres in Volusia County.
Got it.
So Volusia County is the benefit of this. They get 17 acres of paid wetland, and we're stuck with 17 acres of paved, whatever the heck they're going to pave. Thus, runoff from that 17 acres is going to impact, as Mr. Denninghoff said, the folks of North Merritt Island. So to be clear, the state of Florida will be held whole. However, the citizens of Brevard County, the very citizens that handed over or are in the process of handing over $8 million, are the ones that are going to have a negative impact, while the citizens of Volusia County, the ones that did not pay into this $8 million, are going to have a great benefit. So that is the reason.
Okay, well, okay, I get that. I don't know how or why they came up with where they were going to do it, so I'm not going to go there. But as for Blue Origin, yes, I was here. I was part of that group. I was, in fact, the deciding vote that allowed them to come here. I spent a lot of time on the phone at that time with the CEO and COO of Blue Origin, questioning them about us giving them $8 million. And the truth of that matter is that that $8 million was to do the site improvements that were needed to build the plant that they're building rockets. It all came down to the fact that for me to make the decision that I wanted to do that and vote for it was because they were promising that they were going to build a 200,000 square foot building, which was supposed to cost about $200 million. So that's $200 million of capital improvements to the county, number one. Number two, they said that they were going to bring in 300 jobs, averaging $89,000 a year, which comes to $32 million a year. So one employer is going to bring in $32 million worth of salaries. So I thought that was a pretty good deal. And the $8 million they didn't get, in fact, they still haven't gotten it, as I understand, but they wouldn't even qualify to get the $8 million until they got a CO on the building. Well, it turns out that the building that they built was more like 700,000 square feet, not 200,000 square feet, and cost over $700 million. So they've invested an awful lot in our county and our county's future. And one of the other things that made me vote for this is the fact that we've launched thousands and thousands of rockets from this county over the last 50 years. Not one of those rockets has ever been built here. Now we're in the rocket building business. So I think it was and is a real game changer. Now going further, I have breakfast or lunch with Scott Henderson a couple or three times a year. And after, I'm guessing probably 2 years ago, maybe 3, he informed me that they were going to start looking for property to build their rocket engine assembly plant. And I thought, wow, we're perfect for that. And he said, well, you guys don't have the money to compete. And so following up with the EDC and Space Florida, that proved to be true. So I asked him who was going to be the benefactor of that rocket engine assembly plant, and he said it's most likely going to be South Carolina because they've offered $17 million of incentive money. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting. Next time I ran into him and had breakfast or lunch, whatever it was, I said, how did that work out? And he laughed. He said, well, they didn't get it either. Huntsville, Alabama got it. And I said, so what was their economic incentive? $35 million. So we're essentially out of the attracting business as long as we are in the business, this country, the world, in fact, is in the business of trying to secure these businesses. There's an awful lot of competition out there. And I can tell you from going to the Space Symposium that you, Mr. Tobias, said it was just a big party at one time when you first took office. Space Symposium attracts anybody and everybody in the space business in the entire world. I've had lunch with the space people from England. I had lunch with the director of the German Space Command, or whatever their title is. He sat next to me at one of the functions, and the competition out there is extremely fierce. So if we were to ask or restrain monies going to that we've promised, that would give us a humongous black eye in the world, not just the United States, in the world. We would have a difficult time attracting anybody else. And I know when I made that decision 4 or 5 years ago, I got an awful lot of pushback from the ultra-conservatives in this area, and their main thing is that it's corporate welfare and you're picking winners and losers. And they would have come here anyway. Well, we are picking winners and losers. That's what we're in the business of doing. We're trying to attract business in this county, and we're doing a very good job of it. As far as being corporate welfare, well, you just saw the competition. I just talked to you a little bit about the competition. So if you want the business, you have to fork up the money. It's kind of like Super Bowls. Super Bowls just don't pick Miami or Orlando or Dallas or Minnesota. It's all about the economic incentive that those cities offer. And that's how they make the decision on where they're going to take their Super Bowl. And the Super Bowl brings those cities lots and lots of money. So that's the trade-off. So the trade-off for us was an awful lot of money. And I think their employees are up to about 400 now, not 300. So they've done an awful lot for us. And like I said, it would create a tremendous black eye on the part of Brevard County if we were to deny those funds from going to them. And there's no doubt that they've been a good tenant and a good employer for Brevard County. So I just wanted to fill you guys in on that and give you some of the background.
Commissioner Pritchett, then Tobias, and then I have a few thoughts since this is in D2.
Oh, yeah. One more thing, too. They've already fulfilled their contract, like you said, Commissioner Smith. They said they would do a 250,000 square foot. They did a 1 million. They would make a $160 million capital investment. They invested $1 billion into our economy. 145 jobs, 490 full-time jobs. 89 average wage, they're at 114,000 average wage. And Commissioner Lober, you know as well as I do in our area, it really helped our economy greatly. So this is even a no-go. I mean, the contract's already fulfilled. It has nothing to do with what they're building now. So I know that's why you seconded it so quickly, because it's already in contract. Even if you wanted to do this, we would be really messing up something that we agreed to. So whenever you're finished, sir, I'm ready to call the question if you are, sir.
Yeah, I just have a few thoughts I want to share, and you've touched on some of them. Commissioner Tobias?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to be clear, this is a letter. This is a request. But Commissioner brought up some interesting issues, and he was here, so he has a different perspective. Mr. Denninghoff has said that this could have an impact on North Merritt Island when it comes to flooding, about 3 pools a minute. Did they disclose that as a potential impact on the development?
That was 5 years ago. I'm sure they didn't know that they were going to do this today.
Okay. You mentioned about the capital improvement. I assume you mean taxable property. Is that correct? The 200 million.
There's no tax. We still own the property. We don't get any taxes from.
So how is it a capital improvement? I'm trying to understand it.
Well, the capital improvement is that somebody built that building that cost them whatever it cost. I don't know what the final building, but that employed an awful lot of employees to build that building, and I'm assuming an awful lot of them and the companies that were involved were Brevard County.
And finally, symposium. As I mentioned, what did I mention?
You said the definition is party.
Yeah,
Or
it's
to
gr-
drink.
To
To
drink
drink. That's
together.
what you said.
Absolutely correct. So yes. For teetotalers, guys, this is just a letter. We hear time in and time out that North Merritt Island's got flooding issues. This is 3 pools a minute in North Merritt Island. I don't represent North Merritt Island. I just sit up here when they complain about flooding issues. 3 pools a minute. I'll tell you what, I will, if that doesn't bother Commissioner Lober, I am going to vote however he does, since this only impacts his district.
Interesting. Commissioner Isnardi, and then I'm jumping in.
Well, first off, I think we need to care about our own districts, but we need to care about each other's districts as well. Could I ask Mr. Denninghoff a question?
Please.
Chairman?
See, he didn't run off yet. That was his mistake.
I know, it's your fault. It would have been Frank. I would have just deferred to Frank. Now, as far as our utility facilities out there, would we, expanding those facilities to manage water capacity, would that be helpful to manage the drainage, to make sure that we're not overflowing and that sort of thing? Are we able to do that out there in Merritt Island?
We're expanding to the degree that's feasible already.
So there's nothing we could do as a county to improve the water flow? We would just have to live with the existing water problem?
What can be done is, and we are trying to work with them to try to facilitate a consideration of design improvements that could be implemented that would actually reduce the impact that they might have in the most severe storms. They have 2 pumps. One pump pumps directly to the lagoon. The other pump pumps down onto Merritt Island and North Merritt Island, and then we wind up having to repump it. And so,
Okay, so this board
reducing that is
this
what we're
board
trying
could
to do.
potentially send a request to them to make sure that they.
Staff is already going to be doing that.
Okay, but I'm saying if we wanted something official, because that seems to be the route we're headed, we could do that.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for him, but I just wanted to make a couple comments if
Yes,
possible.
ma'am.
If you'll indulge me a moment.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, we weren't here in 2015. I'm not saying that I would have supported an $8 million, because you guys probably know how I feel about cash incentives. However, we can send a letter, but we keep reminding that this is just a letter, it's just a letter, but I mean, aside from the $1 billion, I think I read in more than one place that they've invested, you guys want to be the laughing stock of the rest of the space community that's going to grow here and build rockets here and launch people to the moon? I mean, it's silly because it's meaningless. I think we need to work with our partners. I would not have agreed or supported this $8 million cash giveaway. I would not have done it. I would have begged and pleaded for them to come here and talk about our great workforce and our great housing and all the reasons why they should come here. But I probably wouldn't have supported that had it been here. So I give you, credit for doing what you thought at the time was right. And obviously, they're highly successful. They've invested more than they promised, and it's exciting to be a part of it. To be a part of their successes. So I think sending them a letter saying, please, can we have our money back on. You don't like what the state legislature does, then let's complain to them and ask them to change how we do land mitigation or wetland mitigation. Those are the rules in place, unfortunately. But, we're county. So that's all I'll say about it. I think, I don't feel like being the laughing stock of the rest of the state or the rest of the country, for that matter.
All right, we do have one public comment card. And if she's still here, Miss Bird from Satellite Beach. Do you want to come up? And then I'll jump in. I just want to make sure everyone has a chance. If you would please come up, if you don't mind. Appreciate it. Welcome. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm here just as a resident of Satellite Beach. And first, I think it's wonderful that Blue Origin is here. What they're doing is fantastic, and what they're looking to be doing and continuing doing is wonderful. I do have a little concern about the location. So this is kind of a side issue, so if I'm completely irrelevant, you can shut me down. But basically, what I'm looking at is the investment in what they're doing compared to where we're doing it. So on the one hand, it's not necessarily environmentally responsible, where we're looking at setting up the 10 acres and then the additional 7.5 acres, because we've got the Indian River Lagoon Estuary, we've got the Marine Resource Council, we've got Brevard Zoo, the Oyster Gardener, I was one, we've got the Florida recreational area. We've got all these different programs that we're trying to invest significant time and energy and money into restoring our habitat, and then boom, we're just taking it out. So that incongruity is not necessarily responsible. Also, if we look at the fiscal aspects, you guys are allocating tax dollars for all of this, and yet boom, we're just inefficiently using them because we're hitting the lagoon again. It's a little contradictory from the organizational perspective, because they did the climate pledge in 2019 saying we're going to be carbon neutral. But we know that the wetlands actually have, I don't have the, here you go. They hold 20 and 30% of the estimated global soil carbon, despite occupying just 5 to 8% of its land surface. And then freshwater inlets are even more so. So while I think it's a wonderful idea, I wonder if we can reconsider the location. There's a couple of things that we could look at. One is looking at exploring already impacted areas. So they've already been kind of hurt. So we can reuse those. Another thing is maybe looking at existing organizations to help bring the science to it. So Marine Resource Council, Indian River Lagoon Group, something to help kind of figure out how to do that better. And then also maybe we could do something like a public-private partnership. So looking at some of KSC's already used locations and building upon those. And that might make another wonderful way for us to have even more things. So I think what they're doing is fantastic. I'm just wondering if we can look at a way to not impact our wetlands.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your patience as well once more.
I don't mind.
I know it's been kind of a long meeting.
Yeah.
You did raise some good points. Certainly to the degree that staff, John Denninghoff and perhaps others, can encourage them to look at those design considerations. I think it's pretty clear that, at least there's a direction from, there's a lack of objection from the board as to the thought of pushing that in their direction. I'll reach out to Scott Henderson as well to encourage him to take a look at that. Obviously, folks have their land; they have the right to do what they're entitled to do. If they're not entitled to do it, they can seek to get waivers or variances. Those will be considered if and when they come in. A few thoughts, since this is a D2 item. And forgive me, because I may mention a few things that have already been mentioned. I just want to make sure that we get a few facts out there. And as Commissioner Nardi said, she wasn't on the board when this came up. I wasn't on the board when this came up. I'm neither condemning nor endorsing the $8 million incentive, because it's irrelevant for me to do that at this juncture. It's done and over with. As we've heard, we're contractually obligated to do what we're contractually obligated to do. There's no getting out of that, whether it was a brilliant, moronic, or something in between sort of a decision. It's done. I look at this when I'm looking at the proposed letter, and I wonder, and this is rhetorical to a degree, and perhaps not, to another degree, what the real objective is, because we're never in a million years going to get back the $8 million or the $4 million that's already been expended or thereabouts. The fact is we're obligated to it. They would be insane to give us our money back or to refuse to take any more of it. I hope that they would consider some of the suggestions that have been discussed with respect to the environmental side of things, but to get the $8 million back, it's not going to happen. Looking at the actual letter that was proposed, the first page of it, it talks, and I guess the first zero after the decimal is tenths, so hundredths, thousandths, 10 thousandths, 500 thousandths of a percent of his personal wealth with respect to Jeff Bezos. $8 million is apparently did I say 100 thousandths or 500 thousandths? I don't feel comfortable, even if the board is comfortable, saying that, signing my name on that in any capacity. It just strikes me as anti-capitalism. I don't begrudge the guy for being abundantly well off. I don't think that he was given billions and billions of dollars. He worked his way up in this country, and God bless the guy. I hope more people make a fortune as well. I will say that to the degree that there are environmental concerns, and this doesn't excuse them by any means, it doesn't excuse the county, the state, the federal government, or otherwise, if our existing laws, county code, state statute, U.S. code at the federal level, if our admin regulations as well allowed for them to buy these credits elsewhere, that may be something that needs to be looked at the level where that can be changed, whether that's state legislature or otherwise. I would be thrilled on our end if we could address that, where the mitigation would have to occur within some proximity of where the impact is. I don't know that there's any proposal on the table or that's contemplated at present with respect to that here. And I'm not going to go down the road too far, but we heard from John Denninghoff that this could have negative impact to residents. And I'm not looking to play semantic games, but could is a far stretch from will or shall. I don't know to what degree of certainty there will be or won't be environmental impacts. But again, to go back to the prior point, the initial point, this letter isn't going to improve that situation. If I thought that sending a letter could stop or improve the flooding situation in North Merritt Island, I would sign it in my own blood, but it's not going to do that. One has no bearing on the other. Again, I think the consideration of design improvements is something that absolutely I hope that they look at. I will encourage them to look at. It sounds like staff will encourage them to look at. If someone wants to make a motion after the current motion that's on the table is resolved and we vote on that, I'd be happy to second that and support that as well. I do want to mention I received, as Blue Origin is in District 2, granted it's very close to District 1, I received an email. I've given it to the clerks to add to the minutes for this evening. I'm going to bring up some highlights, and Don, I think you may have access to it, and I apologize. I think you may need access to that system there. But I want to read some highlights. This is from Scott Henderson over at Blue Origin, who is pretty much a superstar, I would say. Is that a fair assessment, Commissioner Smith? Yeah. He talks about, and I'll let Don, if you want to just kind of scroll through it at a reasonable pace so folks can read it. If they want to pause it when they play back the video later, they're welcome to do that. But he talks about the facility being home of their New Glenn rocket manufacturing and launch operations, and he talks about it, basically what they've done, having significantly outperformed all economic impact expectations by adding nearly 500 high-paying jobs, investing over $1 billion in the area via capital improvements, and engaging a significant set of local suppliers and support services, all of which are around here, or a large number of which I should say are around here. The letter that Don is scrolling through, it talks about, not to correct you, Commissioner Smith, but you were talking about 600,000 or 700,000 square feet, and I think Commissioner Pritchett may have mentioned it's over 1 million square feet. As we talked, I mean, they've invested over $1 billion in private capital into this area. So if you look, there's that chart that's right in the center of the screen right now. There is a column on the left that's in gray that talks about the 2016 NBEDS grant agreement terms, and on the right side, immediately adjacent to that in blue, it talks about Blue Origin's execution as of September 30th of this year. So they agreed to a 250,000 square foot facility. That's what they were obligated to do in exchange for this $8 million. Instead of a 250,000 square foot facility, they've got over 1 million. They over quadrupled what they were required to do on that. They were required to invest at least $160 million in capital investment. They invested over $1 billion. It's a high multiple of that number. 145 jobs were required by 2022. We're not yet even in 2022, and they have 490 full-time Blue Origin employees. They were required to have an $89,000 average wage. Their average wage is $114,000. That is way over excelling, over exceeding, whatever you want to term it. They have out-delivered, over-delivered. They talk about investing more than $6 million to ensure any wetland impacts are offset. To the degree that they're willing and or able to invest that in Brevard County, wonderful. I don't know what opportunities exist for them, though. On the second page, he talks about, and I'm just going to highlight one area here, that they've added more than 100 additional high-tech, high-wage jobs to date this year alone during a period where most industries have seen significant downturn. That, to me, is impressive in and of itself. So I appreciate the public comment that we received on this item. I think that there are always environmental concerns when you're dealing with something of this scale. I would certainly encourage, and it sounds like Commissioner Isnardi may make the motion after we deal with the current motion on the floor, to have a letter go out on behalf of the commission, essentially to ask them to look at the design improvements and consider them strongly that have been promulgated or put forth by staff up to this point. Yeah, I would think that they would. And if there's any additional degree of credibility that it receives from having a stamp of approval by the commission, then so be it. I hope we go in that direction. But let's let's go ahead, Commissioner Isnardi, if it's all right. Can we call the question as to the motion on the floor to reject J6 and then address the subsequent that I assume you'll be introducing? Okay, so I'll go ahead and call the question on J6 as to Commissioner Pritchett. I believe it was Commissioner Pritchett's motion to decline or reject item J6. So all in favor of declining to approve item J6, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, J6 has not passed. We unanimously declined it. So Commissioner Isnardi, you have the floor. I think I know where you're going here.
I guess I'll just make a motion that the chairman pen a letter that to Jeff Bezos requesting, smart water mitigation. I mean,
If you all
drainage
would give me
mitigation. I'll give you some leeway,
Perfect.
obviously. You can work with Mr. Denninghoff and just to make sure it has the most minimal amount of impact on not just flooding in the area, but any runoff into lagoon.
I'll go ahead and second that happily. Any discussion on that item? And just to be sure, again, I'm not going to put anything crazy in there, and I do intend to work with staff. If you're okay with it, can we just send it out without having to bring it back yet again?
Yeah,
to
as
the
long as
commission?
it just includes that and doesn't ask for money. Yeah, you can go ahead and send the, I'm
I
okay
don't mind
with that.
seeing it. Yeah, and, well, how about this? How about with approval of the county manager and/or his designee? Is that okay? Then you have an additional safeguard to know that I'm not going off the rails on this thing.
Sure.
Is that okay? All right, perfect. And the second stands with that. Any further discussion on it? All right, seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. All right, J7. So Frank, I don't know who we have addressing this on the staff side of things.
Yeah, J7 is just a request from the Sheriff's Office. They annually apply for the Edward Byron Memorial Justice Grant, and so we just want to advertise the public hearing for that.
Yeah, seeing as how it doesn't require a local match, if someone wants to make a motion, I don't think this is too controversial one.
So moved.
Okay, a motion from Commissioner Isnardi. I'll go ahead and second it. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. And I believe that's it. Anything further on that before we go to board reports? All right, Ms. Bentley.
No report.
Mr. Bate?
No report.
Commissioner Smith?
Board report?
Yes, sir.
Matter of fact, I do.
All right, what you got, sir?
The first thing is, I was supposed to have this resolution to read, so I'll just read it quickly. Whereas the white cane demonstrates and symbolizes the ability of every blind person to become self-reliant and achieve a full independent life and the capacity to work productively in competitive employment. And whereas every citizen should be aware that the law requires that motorists exercise appropriate caution when approaching a blind person carrying a white cane. And whereas Florida law calls upon all public and private employers to be aware of and utilize the employment skills of our blind citizens by recognizing their worth as individuals. Whereas the state of Florida, through its public agencies and with the cooperative assistance of the National Federation of the Blind, can look forward to continued expansion of employment opportunities for and greater acceptance of blind persons in the competitive labor market. And whereas the determination of blind people to be independent and enjoy boundless freedom is enhanced with the growing use of the white cane. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida does hereby proclaim October 15th, 2020 as White Cane Safety Day. Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve this resolution.
All right, I'll go ahead and second that motion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes unanimously.
And one other thing that I wanted to mention, I had received a phone call from Colonel Tim Thomas back in January of 2018, informing me that Major General John Cleland had passed away, and he was quite an influential individual here in the county and throughout our country. He served in 3 different wars, and MOA, the Military Officers Association, was looking for some way to recognize him, and they had an idea of maybe renaming Pineda Causeway, which I wasn't keen on because you're changing something that's been around for a long time. But I did know in the back of my head that we were going to build a bridge as a flyover, what they call here, and in New Jersey, we call them overpasses. In any case, it goes over the tracks. And so I reached out to John Denninghoff, because as I said at the dedication, I went to John Denninghoff because he knows everything. And as I also said at the dedication, if you don't believe me, just ask him. But it's true, he does know everything. But largely his institutional knowledge comes from the fact that he's been around the county so long. And I believe it was sometime after the Civil War that he started working here. So he comes with an awful lot of institutional knowledge. So from that phone call, he worked very hard and discovered that we could, in fact, do it, and it wasn't going to be a big deal to get it done through the state. So fast forward 2.5 years, we ended up with a bridge called the John Cleveland Memorial Bridge. And the Major General had quite an impact, as I said, and he meant an awful lot to a lot of people. And I just wanted some pictures. We have some pictures up here of the event. We had a terrific turnout. We had an awful lot of good people there. But I can tell you, and the reason I'm bringing this up is none of this would have happened had we not had an awful lot of cooperation from an awful lot of people. And I know I'm going to miss some, so I'm going to use some generalities here. Chief among the people that I want to thank is our county manager, Frank Abate, assistant managers, Jim Liesenfeld and John Denninghoff. They did an awful lot of behind-the-scenes work. Don Walker, his folks did an awful lot. Our firefighters and our sheriff's department, they were very instrumental in the success of the day. County staff was huge. They were out the week before making sure that the parking lot at Holy Trinity would be sufficient and where to put all the things like the stage, and the fire department put their truck with the big flag, as you saw. And particularly my staff, Pat, Christine, and Adrian, if they hadn't done what they did, none of it would have happened. So it's fair to say this event would not have occurred without the efforts of an awful lot of people. And I just wanted to use this time to thank them. And that's all I have.
It's pretty good. Commissioner Tobias?
No report, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Pritchett? Commissioner Nardi?
No report.
I've got just a real brief one. I actually got a letter today from the Florida Department of State indicating that the Marion S. Citrus Packing House on 2275 Rockledge Boulevard is slated to be deregistered from the National Register. This was a historic property that unfortunately they ended up leveling in July of this year. It's actually within, if it were cool, well, it's actually getting cool enough. I could walk there from my house. It is a shame that it's gone, but from what I recall, its age was showing. Every time we had a storm, more pieces of the building would come off. So I think they may not have had many options with respect to what they did. But essentially, there's a process by which, if someone wanted to argue against deregistering it, they could go on November 5th. There's a webinar starting at 1:30 that's put on by the Bureau of Historic Preservation to oppose that. From what I see, though, in this letter from the state, if the building no longer exists, it no longer meets the criteria for being listed. So I just wanted to bring it up. I believe it was Victory Groves or Victory Orchard. I can't recall which of the two. Victory Groves. It is a shame. It was pretty. But I think it unfortunately was getting to a state where it was starting to become dangerous. So that's my board report. And I think that concludes it, right? Anything else? All right, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 7:43. Thank you all.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.